Hi y'all, what's up y'all? How everybody doing? Shout out to everybody in the chat with their thumbs jack. Shout out to my mods. Shout out to my subscribers. Man, look, I just want to let y'all know, man, Trey Gang love y'all, bro. Y'all is a part of me. You know what I'm talking about? So it just lights me up when I see y'all coming in the chat. You know what I'm saying? Man, it just do something to me. Hi y'all. We're gonna wait a minute, you know what I'm saying, till a couple of people get in here. And once they get in here, we're gonna shoot a disclaimer right quick. Disclaimer, fair use education purpose use only. All rights, image, music clips, and other material belong to their respective owners, and we do not claim ownership. Education paper education purpose only. All right. Now I'm not here to make you pick and choose when it come to Jesus, the Muslims, and the all God that's in the sky. I know we all Christian. I know we got probably some Muslims in here, you know what I'm saying, and other religious group. I don't know what your belief is, but I know what I was raised up on, and it's Christianity. So, so let me blow my screen up, right? All right, this why I'm here. Cause I was raised up in a Christian home. I'm gonna give you a background. I was raised up in a Christian home. Every Sunday and every Wednesday, it was mandatory to go to church. If you came from a church home, right? I'm talking about like real sanctified people. You know, they don't play about that church. You had to go that John on a Bible study, worship service, you know what I'm saying? So I remember all the verses that the pastors, you know what I'm saying, were teaching, even though I was a child at that time. Because when we had the Bible, it had maps in it. It had maps in it. It always talked about the maps, the routes, what God said, what was going to be prophesied, and who going to fulfill it, and you know what I'm saying, and we all know that it all originated in Africa, right? So some of the churches never teach Africa; they always teach Israel, because once you look at the map, that's all you seen in the Bible. Was when you think about the 12 tribes, right? You know what I'm saying? You thinking Israel, but it's in Africa. Israel is actually a part of Africa. Actually, Africa is way bigger than what we really think. So what I'm basically saying is that Holy Bible, if I tell you and I say, man, all of this is just a game. That's why I say I ain't trying to make you pick and choose on your religion, but the way that you were raised up in the Baptist church, the Seven Evangelists, the Holy Christian, the Catholic Church, all of this, right? So let me break it down. Now y'all see this video right here? Let me explain this video what you about to hear about the Gnostic Bible. I mean the Gnostic Gospel, right? This video an hour long. I understand this video an hour long, but it's well worth watching, because if I tell you that, after when you listen to this video, you will be a firm believer. The Bible ain't nothing but a magic book that can play with your brain. Play with your brain. So basically what I'm saying, this whole video, not just only this whole video, right? But look at the titles on it. Paul, he a Christian, versus Muhammad. When you go back to the Muslims, to make a long story short, guess who invented Muslims? Boy, this religion finna get exposed. This religion finna get exposed. Cause once you go to the Holy Quran and the Bible, now you finna see why it finna be Paul versus Muhammad. Cause guess who created the religion? The same people that created Christianity. Moses was a Muslim. They go by the Moses teaching. Everybody know that. When you go back to the Luca video, but guess what? They created that. The Christians created that. This why you got Muslim. So when Jesus was born, right? And when Jesus was born, as they thought, as we thought that, yeah, you know, Jesus gonna be born, you know what I'm saying? Look at this. All of this it's just two characters. It's a movie, like they was never real. But the religion is real. So when you think about Noah's Ark, now go back to the beginning of the Bible. When it said, when God said this, come, let us make man in our own image. Did they stamp that in the Bible? Thumb me up. Once you stamp me on this one, you finna totally understand this video when I say these people were actually characters in the Bible. In the Bible. They was characters. So when you listen to God was like, yeah, matter of fact, you can go to Egypt and see the pyramids. You can see the writings on the wall and all of this. Now you finna see why white people was already there. Now when it comes to Africa, white people was already there. So guess what I figured out by watching this video? Cause this the $1 million ticket right here. After that whole video that after all these videos, check this out. Just read the titles on it. Ancient map go back to the 75, back to Africa, according to the Bible location. Look, did Jesus even claim to be God? Watch how he finna break it down. And once you hear how he finna break it down, be like, oh man, let me tell you about the Jesus birthday. Oh, the books banned from the Bible. Oh, this video. Jewish journalists expose Israel dark secrets. All right, hot mic moment between Putin and the I don't know how to pronounce that Chinese president name, but I think he's Chinese. All right. This why the gospel, this how, hold on, wait a minute. Why don't the gospel describe Jesus' appearances? Ooh. Right? Israel Prime Minister admit that Jewish gen originated from Israel. All right. The strange timeline of the Bible in the book of Genesis, right? Saturn is God and the symbols proves it. Now I'm just giving y'all a title. The entire history of Jerusalem. All right, no starvation in Gaza. Now notice, you finna understand why we got wars between Iraq and Israel. You finna understand. Once you watch all these videos, all Jesus Grant, and this shit, they even got this on the History Channel. They even made movies about it. So when they made movies about it and gave you pictures, so when you look at those statues in Egypt, guess who they really was? White people. White people was already in Africa and nobody don't know where they come from because they came from caves. That's why you got the Noah story. So basically what I'm saying here. So basically what I'm saying here, right? Who are God chosen people? You see how the Israel map keeps showing up? But if I show you Africa, right? Check this out. This is what I learned in the Bible. Remember Noah's flood and they said the whole world was flooded? That's a lie. It was warfare. It was warfare. And all this shit documented, and you could pull this up. That's why they say stick to the Bible and do not read no other gospel about it. Notice why the book of Jubilee and you know what I'm saying, and all the other books, the Enoch book, you know what I'm saying. Notice they don't want none of that when it comes to the Bible. And I'm going to show you the reason why. All right. This Africa, everybody know what Africa shaped like, right? Everybody know all of this is desert, right? Even this is desert. Look, all of this was up under water at some point in time. Now, all this was up water at some point in time, and these gonna be the high peaks of the mountain, right? So look, whoever was in charge at that time in military warfare, they had control of the water. That's why you got the Niles River. At this time, this what make Israel so special. Cause guess what they did? They built these rivers. Look how they cut it off. They cut, when you think of a borderline, if you drain all this water from right here, they would still be considered Africa, right? So if you fill in land with these gaps, this part of Africa, that's why you finna get the Noah, when Moses parted the Red Sea. Guess who parted the Red Sea? It actually wasn't God. It was somebody put a plague out and said, look, I'm finna flood all of this here. It's a cover up. It was a mass murder. So when you think in the Bible, when God say, yeah, Noah, build this boat right here. So when that boat flood, you know, when that cause a flood, because I'm trying to knock out the population. So this is evidence how much damage they did. All of this will be flooded. You got the desert, all of this flooded. Look what's not flooded. The Europeans, Russian, all of this. All of this is mountains, high peaks. This is high peaks. So somebody was like, yeah, we gotta wipe all of this out because of the Bible. That's why you got the Noah flood theory. Look how much damage they did. If you fill in these water gaps all the way from here and line it out, all of this will be Africa. Look, if you drain the water from all here, all of this will be Africa. Now look how Africa will be. Don't you see, if you put land right here, land right there, land right there, and land right there, look how Africa, look how big it would be. That's why they got cities upon the water, because that's the one that got flooded out. That's the one that got flooded out. That's why you got cities upon the water. Look. The flood reached all the way to her. It spurred the middle side and damn near spurred the South Africa, right? But if you put land right here, drain the water out from right here to here, and put just land right there, them gonna be some cities upon the water. That's why you got islands. That's why you got islands. So basically what I'm saying is, check this out. When it came back to the Bible and when he said, hey, I'm gonna create Adam and Eve, give them a creation story. And we're gonna kick them out to God. And it's all about if you flood them, guess what they did? Once they flood everybody out, they start building pyramids and temples. That's why they will know how to carve into mountains, meaning caves, means. That's why you got a lot of caves. Don't y'all know every scroll they said they found, it was either in a cave or close to a sea? What race that were living in caves? The white man. And once I Google all the caves in the world, check this out. Y'all, this was a military strategy. You want to know how Jesus' name got popular? When they flooded out, when they came to Egypt, when you look at all those statues, them actually white people. Them actually white people working in the sun. As slaves. So look how much they flooded. They spurred this. Check this out. They spurred they land. That's why you got the Caucasus Mountain. That's why they said Noah right here, Noah's Ark landed right here. Do this make sense now? Noah's Ark landed right here. This is Caucasus Mountain. On the highest peak when it come to her. So when you think about military strategy, flood all of this out. Flood all of this out. Then once you go to America, look at everybody that's in green. Everything was spurred. Now watch this. The flood reached all the way in Nevada. That's why you got the Grand Canyons. All of this shit carved was up underwater. If you look at all, you know what I'm saying? Think about a road. This wet spot. You know what I'm saying? That's what you call it? A puddle of water. When you ride on, you know when it, but you still see a little street. You know what I'm saying? Look at it like this here. This will all be flooded. Notice it's going all the way down from right here all the way to Mexico. And it spurred this. Look. So somebody in the military was like, let's control some rivers and try to flood out the whole world, right? And we're gonna spur this side. So once you go back to the United States, if you put land right here, wherever you see islands at, islands, guess where you finna connect it back to? Watch this. If you scroll all the way down here and go to South Africa, bro, don't it look like a flood? That's why when you go to the map now, all the water symbolizes Noah's flood. They just didn't kill everybody. It was a military strategy. So basically what I'm saying, the God who did the flood and gave you the first creation of the world, the same people that was living in caves, the white man. The white man. And here's proof. When you get the Adam and Eve story, guess what they said where they was at? Over here. By Kuwait. Right? Kuwait. This where the Garden of Eden supposed to be at. Baghdad, Iran right over here, right? Keep this in mind. And that's why the United States is going to war. Every president done bombed either Kuwait, Iran, you know what I'm saying, or Iran. Look, Saudi Arabia. So think about it. Why is America going to war with these people? Because just what they did. Nobody don't know where the white man came from. So they start building caves all around. Once they were building caves, look at caves, it's like spies into the near city. So they got caves all around here and was like, look, we got all the information that we need, and boom. Once we clear all this area out, we're going to start with the Adam and Eve. Right? So once you think about, that's why you got the United Emirates. Uh-oh. So when you think of the Adam and Eve, when Cain got kicked out the garden, Lut was the first city that was created. It actually wasn't even the first city, cause people still alive. Guess what they had to do? Take over land little by little. It started in Africa. Check this out. Do this make sense? It started in Africa. Boom. Cause once you look at the Garden of Eden, of the creation, the Garden of Eden is either her or her, because they fled out the garden. Guess where they were fled? If the Garden of Eden was her, like you got to go for Eden, right? So if they fled, look where first they had to flee to the Iranians. And guess what they did? Gave Iranians Muslim history. That's how Muslim got invented. So once they got invented to Muslim and travel all the way to Israel, cause don't y'all remember, y'all, they said Noah had 3 sons and all of this, and he told them to scatter all over the world. You go east, I go west. They split up. They split up. Look, they split up, right? So, when you think of the garden, where do you think the Garden of Eden would be at? It's going to be right here in Ethiopia. So, guess what? That's why you got an Ethiopian named Emmanuel. They're supposed to be God's son. Why is the Ethiopian image of him? Look, have y'all ever seen the black Jesus? Ethiopia Jesus? The black Madonna? But check this out. If you look at that image, he really looked like a little white boy with Ethiopian heritage, right? Bloodline. But the world on this side, where they called it Iranian, Yemen, all of these names is after the European people. What they did, they bred it with these people already had the gospel. They already had the Old Testament. And that's why when you read Genesis all the way to Moses, don't you know they were Muslims? Moses was a Muslim. Noah was a Muslim. Did you hear what I said? But it's all made up though. It ain't no such thing a Muslim or a Jew or Christianity. It's about, look, these people had a game plan. We finna carve stones. That's why you got images, a statue, of stone figures in Africa, Iran, you know what I'm saying? And all this shit in Africa. But don't you know all those stones, the reason why they had to cut the nose off? Cause they taught us the reason why all the stone statue nose is shot off, cause Napoleon couldn't believe how civilized the African was. Making like we was mighty kings, which we was. Mighty kings. But guess what they did? They flooded that motherfucker. Once they flooded that giant and thought they were gonna wipe them out, they didn't. So when they tried to wipe them out, all they did was scatter all across the world. Check this out. They already had boats then, right? Man, look, the Africans came here. Boom. Africans came here. all the way to the United States. That's why you got the Christopher Columbus story, another creation, a new world order, right? So basically what I'm saying here, everything what I'm telling y'all, this finna show you that Trey Gang, you is on to something. Cause although Bible story was nothing but images. And to prove this, look what I found out. Check this out. Look. The role of an icon. This word already exists back in the days. Y'all remember when God said, come, let us make man in our image. Look. Image was already in the Bible. Whoa! Our likeness. So guess who? So look. Now you finna see. Oh, they really had to cut. I see why you said they had to cut the nose off the statue when they come to Ethiopia again, right? See that? It's imagery. It's imagery. That's why they had to cut the nose off. Look at his eyes. This eye. This was predicted in the Bible when they said, yeah, we're gonna abhor you with a child. Name him Emmanuel. But they said, no, name him Jesus. And you got the same image. So when it comes to the Ethiopian Bible, Christianity started in Ethiopia, where the Garden of Eden. And guess what they did? Guess what a white man, guess how the white man could create a world? If he wrote the Bible and he said, come, let us paint man in our image. You could do all that with a paintbrush. I wouldn't have learned that till I seen this. It's a church. Early Christian foundation. Look, I had to go back to all of this. Y'all remember in the book when it came to Moses? Moses was a Muslim, but he a made up character though. He the one, that's why the Muslims don't eat pigs and swines and all of this old stuff. They go by the teachings of Moses and Abraham. They's Muslims, right? Make it so bad, both of the scholars from Christ and Muslim would agree to that. But then you got Jesus. They're supposed to feel the prophecy for the Muslim. What Moses said about the... Have you noticed Moses had the 10 Commandments that were written on stones? What God would write tablets on stones at that time? What? On stone tablets. Think about the Fred Flintstone. Fred Flintstone had the tie, right? Then you got a Jesus. They try to paint. Look. Now, if you look at the nose again, look at the nose. So this is what the white man did. The Jews, right? Everything what I'm about to say to y'all right now, it's finna make y'all hot when it comes to Jesus. Cause everybody love Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody love God. The Jesus Father. God. Look at the image they painted. But you don't supposed to paint an image of Jesus or God. Cause it's forbidden. Like, nah, you don't do that. Then when you ask, what's God really name? And they said, nah, you don't need to know that cause your word, you know what I'm saying, you ain't holy enough to speak his name. All right. So basically what I'm saying here, the Bible taught us how to worship false idols. That's why you got too many depictions of Jesus. Instead of looking at a stone statue carving of Jesus, because nobody ain't never seen a stone statue carving of Jesus, right? But you got a picture of him. Once you go to real life and be like, wait a minute, let's go back to the birth record, because at that time when y'all said he was living, right? You supposed to have a birth record. Because don't you know what their biggest mistake? They said Jesus was born in the 1st century. If Jesus was born in the 1st century, that means it's made up. Why would they admit that Jesus was born in the 1st century and we living in the 20th century? You can Google this shit. And all the apostles that said they walked with Jesus witnessed these miracles that Jesus was doing. Nobody else didn't witness these miracles but the 12 disciples and his followers, them family members, characters that was made up. Characters that was made up. So basically, if I tell you, if I show you this, look, the reason why I said this, it's all public information. Look at this like a murder trial. Look at this, because you be like, oh, they said Jesus died and Jesus supposed to be the one. Oh, let me put it like this here. Jesus had a mother named Mary, right? And they said Jesus supposed to be a descendant of Cain, Adam, and Eve, right? Adam and Eve. I'm finna get the Christians thinking on this one now. Thumb me up when I get you thinking when I say this. If Jesus came from a royal bloodline like Cain and Abel all the way to King David, you know what I'm saying, in the old, cause you know in the Old Testament they talking about, yeah, they finna predict a son of God that's gonna come in this world. It's gonna be a child named Emmanuel. That's what they called Jesus back then. Emmanuel. Be on the lookout for a baby. So everybody on the lookout for a baby, you know what I'm saying, it's finna be named Emmanuel. But keep this in mind, this a Muslim tradition. A tradition. This, cause Moses was a Muslim, according to the Bible, but keep this in mind, the religion is made up. So boom. That's why you got Iranians, you know what I'm saying, in the United States bombing Iranian, Afghanistan, because they know the truth about the Bible. Notice in the Holy Quran, they got prophets in the Bible named Prophet Muhammad. Talking about he got vision from God. Same story like Jesus. You know what I mean? Not Jesus, but Moses. Moses was a prophet. They said in the Bible, Aaron, the brother of Moses, was a priest. Was a priest. All this shit made up. So that's why you got Muslims Think about a white man came up with like, damn, since everybody carving woods and stones, you know what I'm saying? That's what they want y'all to think when you read the Bible. Yeah, God don't like these people carving stones and worshiping as God. Cause when it came to Moses, Moses had to you know, when they carved the made the a calf out of gold, all of those shit. All look, what you think when we do when we look at Jesus, right? Jesus' image is still an idol. Nobody never proved he lived. You ain't got no extended records. You ain't got nothing. Only records that you got of Jesus in the Bible. So look, I had to read all of this when it come back to the Iron Ages. Once it go back to the Iron Ages, the Bronze Ages, the early now you see why Noah's flood, guess what they did? Boom, guess where it started from? When you think about where the boat landed at, this right here by the Conqueror's Mountain. So look what they did, try to flood Africa out. Try to flood Africa out. So I had to read this. The early expansion of the homeless out of Africa. So, if you look who had control of the water system back then, all of this shit would be connected to what? Africa. That's why you got this right here. Look how the map show. You want to know why it would be flooded? Because it's... Look at this, the higher land, right? Cause you know the more you get in the atmosphere, the more colder it get. And look who burning up at the bottom, where all the heat is. This is why they said this the North Pole. So who had control of the water system if it's coming out the slope, trying to rain out Africa? Now y'all see that. Now y'all see the difference now? That's why they got Africa up under there. Cause if you look at it like this here, boom. It's like a waterfall then. It's like a waterfall. It's a waterfall. You see what I'm saying? I had to read this to this. Recent Africa with the Hermits. When I read all of this is why I got all of this shit pulled up. And the reason why I got all of this shit pulled up, look where Europe at. That's why everything was written in Greek. When it comes to the Bible, all the language switched up. They said Hebrew was the first language. If you look up what Hebrew actually means, it means a man don't have a land of his own. So he gonna take land. So the Noah flood was a military nigga said, I could take this land by water. That's why you get Hollywood movies when they talk about you know they make those Hollywood movies of the mermaid and you know what I'm saying, the water god up on the water, you know what I'm saying, and all of those stuff. So, make a long story short, this is what I had to look at. Stone Age. When was the Stone Age? Whoa! Hold up, why the Stone Age is mentioned in Ethiopia? Look, and then in the Bible it mentioned Ethiopia. Oh, so when you think about how those rocks get to Egypt, if it was a flood, man, look, that shit finna move rocks and stones to your location. So guess who? So when you think about Ethiopia, right? In the Stone Age, and this is the Stone Age. If you look at the map again, look where the Stone Age. So if it was a water and all this rock, all they rocks came from right up in here, all the way down. Now you see why they can. Damn, that's why we got those rocks here in this location. So I had to read this. Look, I had to read all of this. Look what everything I got pulled up. The Stone Ages, the Catholics, the Bronze Ages. The Bronze Ages is the white man's that was working in slavery. They was working in slavery and they was burning up in the sun. Don't the white man look like bronze? When he get a tan, you can look at a bodybuilder. You can look at a bodybuilder. Look, you can look at the bodybuilder. This the Bronze Ages. That's when they were building the pyramids, carving in the mountains. These are only people that were carving in the mountains. You can't name one African that carving in the mountains. Carving in dirt unless they trying to find something. They ain't living in no mountains. They working. But these people were carving in the mountains and worshiping paintings, wood carvings, and stone. This is what they said. Guess what a white man gonna look like if he in the sun? You gonna have one look like copper, and you gonna have one look like bronze. Whoa! Bronze Age in Europe. So look, I went back to the Jewish history. It dates back to the 17th century. No, it doesn't go. It go all the way back. Yeah, I'm right. That's when Jews was involved. Because they started talking about Jews in the 17th century. So look at it like this here. The first religion was Muslim. That's when they was in Iranian. That's why, you know what I'm saying, you got Iranians as Muslims. When they went to Israel and spread out of Israel, that's where you get Jews. So the white man invented Muslim and Jews and gave you prophets. And so the Muslim thinking that, oh, we got a prophet Muhammad, and if you look at Muhammad's message, it's the same thing with the Jews. So since they created Muslim, Jews, then they created Christianity. Now they finna spread Christianity because all the prophets got one thing in common. It's gonna be a Messiah. But when it comes to the Jews, Jesus is supposed to come from a descendant of Adam and Eve all the way down to King David. But if you look at Jesus' mother, her mother, if Jesus is supposed to come down through the bloodline, through the Jews, but it started out with Muslim history with Moses. So when you gave the creation of Jesus with the Christianity, and you chose Mary, another character, Mary, and say, God say, look, I'm gonna bless you with a son. if Mary is the mother and it got no relations with the Jews and all of this, but she might worship their religion. But keep this in mind, what you call image and worshiping when you dealing with characters. So guess what? Why God would say, I'ma bless you, Virgin Mary, to have Jesus, and he coming to save the world, and Jesus is not from the bloodline of David or Cain or Adam and Eve. Cause if you said in the Bible, it's gonna be a son that's gonna say the word and it's gonna come through your bloodline, it's the royal bloodline, but you mean tell me God impregnated the wrong girl that don't got no bloodline, royal bloodline in her? So, guess what he said? He a descendant of Jesus. Watch this. So guess what the white man did? The white man came to Ethiopia. Look, the white man came to Ethiopia, bred with the Ethiopian. Put it like this here. The white man had stones and tablets. Put it like they just fabricated evidence. When it come to it was all a lie, right? So guess what they did? When they present the gospel to the Ethiopian, be like, have you ever heard of Jesus? Look at it like this here. The white man came and schooled the Ethiopia about Jesus. Keep this in mind, Ethiopia still living in the jungle. They living their best life. They hunting. You know what I'm saying? They worship the moon and the stars and the sun. They sun worshipers, right? So if you look up at him and he said, hey, I'm a descendant of Jesus. Look, I'm a descendant of Solomon. And Solomon is a character. Watch this. He said, he gonna be a descendant of Jesus. And then once you look at this picture, that's why they had to shoot the nose off. Cause you know what was happening? They was like, damn, I'm peeping the game, white man. This is some cold shit you came up with. So we finna paint him in our likeness and get him an afro. You see what I'm getting at? That's why when you trace Ethiopian lineage, when they come back to Jesus, now you got a black Madonna. So guess what the Ethiopian did? They peeped the game and they was like, well, look, we finna paint Jesus in our image with Emmanuel. Look, that's why you got a black Jesus. Keep in mind, this other races out here in the world, and you thinking that if you got a God out here that you're gonna choose a particular crowd or family and say, hey, you my chosen people. No, it don't work like that. So basically what I'm saying here, he looked like him, but without the mustache. So they painted Jesus after their image. Once you know how much Jesus would do for them, if it wasn't for a fictional character named Jesus, you won't go to church every Sunday and give them all your money. Right? Matter of fact, if you go, I read all of this stuff, y'all. Look, I went back when it came back to April Fool's Day. It was a practical joke. Guess what the joke is about on April Fool's Day? Guess what the joke was about? Mass media can be involved with the pranks. So you mean to tell me April Fool, long when? Look when it was invented. Hold on. Check this out. Hoax, pranks, jokes. So if I tell y'all that's what the Bible was, pranks, jokes, and hoax. If you don't believe me, look, read this. Once you read it, all of go back. What? Middle Ages. Read this. Read about St. Patrick's Day, because St. Patrick was who? Another figure. Listen to this video. Watch this.
Elaine Pagels, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I've recently been getting really interested in the Gnostic Gospels, the so-called Gnostic Gospels.
Yes.
And in my work as someone who's interested in philosophy and religion, they've always sort of been on the sideline. I've always been aware that there are these texts that didn't make it into the New Testament that have these weird and wacky stories about Jesus and a totally different idea about the origins of Christianity. But I really want to go on a deep dive. And so I'm going to be making some episodes discussing particular texts, the famous texts, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas. But what I wanted to do today was get an overview of this library, what it is, where it comes from, what it means for our studies of early Christianity. So I suppose I can only begin by asking, what is a Gnostic Gospel?
Well, it's first of all a misnamed gospel, and I'm partly responsible for that, because when I first wrote a book about them, these are texts that surprisingly landed upon our group of graduate students and faculty when I was a graduate student at Harvard in the 70s, for example. And we were astonished to hear about a discovery in 1945 of over 50 ancient writings, ancient religious writings. They're not all Christian by any means. They're it's almost a miscellaneous library in many ways. So classifying them in that way is a misnomer. And
Look, before I play this video, I just want to give y'all the heads up. That's why they said the books banned it from the Bible. What are the Gnostic Gospel about? Don't you know what the Gnostic Gospel, what it's finna prove? This was it's finna prove, this right here. Hold on, not this. But this. That's how you could convince people of religions. Don't you know in the Old Testament, there was like, y'all, God don't like them worshiping false idols. False idols that's made out of wood, clay, or mud, right? But guess who created Adam and Eve out of mud? Oh, wee! Can I wake somebody up with that? They said don't worship wood, stones, mud, and clay. But God, when he created man out of dirt. So once you go back to the Bible now, when I say, hey man, the Jews finna get exposed. Why God had to create a man out of dirt and he got control to create man of a spirit. Don't that hit different now? Let me know, do that hit different now? So, once he created man out of mud, go back to the Old Testament. One of these people worshiping statues, idols. That's why, check this out, that's why when you got those scholars who like, yeah, we found more little statues. You know what I'm saying? This had to must be a god and all this. Look what he would look like. Ethiopian descendant. Look at the nose. So guess what? The white man granddaddy said, hey, you got these people worshiping the sun. They know the real religion and what the sun is all about. When I say the sun, that's the one that rise, you know what I'm saying, in sunset. That's who you really supposed to worship, the sun and the moon. Them the ones that give life, you energy. You know what I'm saying? They give you life energy, make your grass grow, your crops grow, all of this. And make you feel good when the weather right. Why not worship the sun? Now I see why. Cause you will, guess what? If you really want to talk about who the true God, why scientists trying to say, man, the sun is a mystery. It's just a big blame a ball of fire. It ain't no blame ball of fire because you said oxygen was in the space. This is what they did. If you was a sun worshiper and wish on rain, water, all this so you could grow your crops, you could farm your land, you could clean your clothes, and you dealing with the sun, water, and that's what give us life. Water give us life. Sun give us life. So these people were worshiping, so look, you had people worshiping the sun, so what they did was like, we're gonna give you Jesus and he gonna be the son of God. That's why they paint the sun behind their head when they come to their family tree. Look, that's why the Bible say don't question God on anything. Look, that's just like God telling you, be like, hey God, you said this and that, like you saw Jesus impregnated a virgin and she married to an old man and they already married, so they didn't have no honeymoon. Don't question God. Oh, my bad, I'm asking the wrong question. Hey God, you said in the Moses, you know what I'm saying, it was prophecy about a child was gonna be born and they're gonna forgive our sins. But the lady you said the prophecy was gonna be fulfilled, she don't have no bloodline to King David and them, like you said in the Old Testament, because she was married to Joseph, and Joseph, you know what I'm saying? Oh, don't question me. What? So basically what I'm showing you, when they were worshiping stones, guess who had them worshiping stones and statues? And just say if you make a Adam and Eve, you can make an Adam and Eve out of dirt, carve it up, and you can find it years later in a cave. In a cave. Why you think they found all their teachings in caves? In caves. Keep this in mind, who people were living in caves. So when I read all of this shit, look at the look. These is not real people, bruh. These were statues they were worshiping. When God said in the Bible, come, let make man in our own image. This is what it looked like. So when you think of Adam and Eve, he made them out of mud. They made these people out of stones. Look, symbols. I had to read all of this. Go back to Cleopatra. Notice all these just pictures and drawings. It's nothing, no birth records. You could trace all this shit back in the King James. They're just like, hey, is Trey Game real? Yes, he real. He was born. He got records. Where you can find these records? In this town right here where he was born at. But why the town that Jesus was born at don't got no birth records? But the Bible? So look, that's why you got pictures now. Time done changed. Yeah, just paint pictures and say these old pictures. Look. All of this, look. So basically what I'm saying is, this is what I'm basically saying. All the disciples was fake. Jesus was fake. I hate to say this, and I raised up in the church, but this finna show you proof they all characters. Cause everything that I showed you, I got a whole lot else to show you. Look, like Osama bin Laden, right? If you put it like this here, you got the white man came to you with the Old Testament and you became a Muslim. They done taught you all of this and you believe that these people came on your land and gave you the Old Testament. The Old Testament. And breed it with your family tree. And then when they breed with your family tree, they fled to Israel. Once they fled to Israel, cause keep this in mind, they were still Muslims. Keep this in mind. Jesus, Moses was all made up characters, right? They were all made up characters. So when they fled to Israel, they got a New Testament now. Boom. We done convinced them to be Christians. I mean Muslim. Then they went to Egypt. And they produced Muslims in Egypt. They went to Europe and convinced Christianity. Cause if you think about the timeline, that's how Christians gonna get started in Ethiopia. That's why Ethiopia painted a black Jesus with an afro with a sun behind. That's why when it come to the Iranians, they did the same thing. They all show you carvings and pictures, but really no birth record. Nobody can confirm none of this shit. So boom, once they started the Muslim, then they started Christianity. But guess what they was before it was Muslim invented and Christianity was invented? Guess what the first religion was when it comes to the white man? Freemasonry. So boom, what I'm basically saying is this. Them folks had these people worshiping idols, stones, and tablets, and spread this shit all over the world. So once you go to this side of the country and this side of the country, and you like, damn, they got statues over here. They got statues over this part of the land. So it's gonna make it true. So if you read the Bible again, when Abraham split up, you know what I'm saying? When the family, the 12 tribes split up, guess what they all split it up to? All over the land, and they carved stones, woods, and paintings. So when you read your Bible and go to these foreign lands and you can look this shit up, you'll be like, oh man, look, this was back in ancient time. This shit had to been real. That's how you gotta get everybody to have faith now. Cause if they were spread all over the land and you could find all this shit over the land, you see what I'm saying? So look. So once they started the Muslim, the Christianity, and have people worshiping stones, and guess what they did? Since when they had them people worshiping in this, cause guess what? Stones and all of this tablet will give you laws of how to live and how to eat and all of this. So guess what was happening? They figured out, oh, this was going on. So we accept the Prophet Muhammad. And then once they were accepting the Prophet Muhammad, they were like, we're gonna cover up our women. That's why they had to cover up their women. Yeah, don't show your nakedness. Right? That's why you got Iranians, wives, they always covered up. You don't see too much, right? Cause they peep out the game. So they was like, look, we'll keep it going with this Prophet Muhammad shit. Cause the white man was like, man, look, I'm finna crush everything what we taught you. Cause look how many people there was Muslims in the Old Testament. It was Muslim everywhere. So what they did is set them up. Oh yeah, your prophet ain't reliable. Cause we got Jesus now. And we got a story. Jesus died for everybody's sin. They're just like Jehovah's Witness. You know how Jehovah's Witness come knocking at your door, boom, boom, boom. Have you ever heard the good news? What's the good news? Jesus died for you. Then they started out with Noah's Ark and the creation. So just imagine Moses came to their town, and it's a made up character, right? You got to make this character up. But the events is still real because the white man still went and convinced them, hey, this is how we set them up. We had the New Testament and the Old. We had the New Testament and the Old Testament before Adam and Eve. We got a book over here that's saying, hey, go with the law of Moses. The Muslim took it in. I'm going with the law of Moses. They went to Israel and set up shop in Israel. Still upon the Muslim religion. And so at some point in time, when religion was getting spread all over the world, now they can say, hey man, you worship stones and bricks and shit. This in your land right here. Look what we found on your land. Here go your idols right here. You know what? Let me show you Jesus. And show you another idol, and everybody accepted it. So I'm finna play this video. When I say the whole Bible is fake about the war, just say King David fake. They gonna admit. In so many words, they're gonna be like, yeah, we don't even know if these people was real. But if you go back to the timestamp, it looked like they characters. But since the Holy Bible and if you've been taught by the Holy Bible and if you accept that in the Holy Bible, you gonna try to fight against that shit, bro. Look.
I called them Gnostic Gospels because we didn't know what else to call them. I would now call them early Christian Gospels. They're ones that displeased some of the bishops and did not make the New Testament canon for very specific reasons. But they opened up the ancient world to us and the understanding of how the beginning of Christianity emerged in quite a different way than we ever knew before. Just as the Dead Sea Scrolls really transformed the way we think about Judaism in the first century.
Yeah, the Gnostic, or the I suppose the early Christian Gospels, I should begin calling them. The thing that's so amazing about them is that though we've known about their existence since the beginning of Christianity, really, I mean, you have the Bishop Irenaeus writing against heresies and talking about these Gospels that were circulating at the time that we didn't have access to, but we knew that they existed through the writings of their opponents. These texts are finally actually discovered for us to be able to read the originals themselves in what, 1945?
In 1945. And yes, we had known them for 2,000 years as heretical, abominable, deceitful, and diabolical texts, right? Through the writings of the church fathers, including Irenaeus, whom I got to know pretty well on this journey. Second century bishop. He was a Syrian missionary, studied with Bishop Polycarp, who was burned to death in the arena in Antioch in about the year 180 because he was a Christian, and he had sent this young missionary.
Now y'all heard what she said? That's why they was killing Christians in the beginning. Now, once you go back to history, it even was proven that they was killing Christians. People that was believing in that stuff, they was killing them, bruh. They were killing them for believing in that stuff. Right? So look.
Irenaeus to the hinterlands of barbarian France, Gaul, right? And he was there trying to convert people to Christianity. And he was aware that some people were reading Gospels that were not the most familiar. That is, the ones now in the New Testament. They were reading others that Irenaeus decided were subversive and diabolical. And so that's how we knew about them. These are awful. That was what we knew. And when suddenly we could read them for the first time, I was overjoyed, and all of us were delighted because they transformed what we had expected.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to press just how incredible a discovery this is, and so, relatively speaking, recent in biblical scholarship. I mean, if you think about the amount of time that people have had to pore over every single word in the Gospel of John, thousands of years, these Gospels have only been in our possession for less than 100 years. And so it's a really exciting area of scholarship. And your book, The Gnostic Gospels, I have a copy here, sort of a
probably in 315 by a soldier named Paconius.
Now watch this. Check this out. Everything what that lady about to say right now, everybody know they Bible, right? You know all the scriptures and all of this. when you listen to this shit after her mouth, and once I pull all the evidence of, cause all this public teaching, tell me what you finna think about Jesus now and what public information showing when they come back to the Bronze Age, the Stone Age. She know the truth. She know the truth, but she found out the truth the hard way. So once you want to tell the people, you're going to be like, damn, how can I break it down? Watch this shit.
And I think there are many arguments about these texts, as likely you know. So I'll give you the version that we learned.
Yes.
I think it's most likely, of the options with which I'm familiar, that these had been treasured in the library, the sacred library of the monastery of St. Pachomius, the head of the...
That's why they call the library. That's where you get the terms library. If I tell a lie and I bury it, that means a library. Put it like this here. That's why we get baptized. Cause when they flooded the world, when God tried to, when these people try to destroy this land, and they try to put this land up on the water. They try to put this land up on the water and preserve this land up top. And it fails, right? And it fails. So when you get baptized with Jesus, that's why they dip you in the water, because that's what the white man did. Was try to flood everybody and gave you the Noah's flood. You would never look at it the way I'm looking at it now if you didn't read all of these texts. Slavery in ancient Egypt. Azursky. Remember the movie 300? Now listen to this shit again.
The chief monastery, the foundation monastery of 12 or 13 that he created was within as I said, a walking distance of this cave. And when I walked to the cave from the monastery ruins, you walk in and you can see the beginning of the line of a psalm written on the wall of the cave, because the monks would go there to pray and meditate, and they would have the first line of the psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd," or from the Lord comes my help, would be the first line. And
that's in the Stone Ages. That's why they was going in the caves. Ooh-wee.
Then they would pray that psalm as they meditated in those caves. And about 300 years after the death of Jesus, when the Bishop of Alexandria, Athanasius, made the first list of what we now call the New Testament canon, which means a standard.
Boy, y'all see how they had all of this shit written? So look at it like this here. What they did was told y'all Jesus was born around about this time. All this shit was made up. Jesus was born around about this time. This is where you get Christmas from. That's why you get Santa Claus, because Santa Claus comes down and chilling and bless the kids. But if you think about Herod's story, King Herod the Great, he was trying to kill all the firstborn kids, right? So you see, it was two different prophecies. You got one that's killing kids and one blessing the kids, right? So when you think about Christmas and think about the Bible, boy, you're gonna be like, all this shit is characters. Everybody know, well, Santa Claus ain't real. But St. Patrick is real, and St. Nick is real. St. Nick is Santa Claus. Y'all remember we seen those songs? Oh, St. Nick, the Christmas song. So when you heard these little words, when she was like, yeah, they went in the caves and they meditated. So when they went in there and to worship, to meeting, I look at it like this year. Them folk went in those meetings and they had a meeting. And they was like, man, we can get some money off Jesus because everybody gonna come to church. Man, you finna give money just because you done made sins and you want to make up for your sins. So let me, I feel a little better if I put something in the collection plate, right? So once you get the Stone Ages and say they was in the caves with idols, and the same idols, that's why you get explorers. Just say you got a white man in this world want to find its history. That what inspired them to go to a cave in the beginning. And once they go into a cave, they discover a cave, and guess what they found? Images, carvings, idols. Idols. So boom. Then you get this shit.
The measurement to keep the walls straight. He said, just read the Gospels on my list. There are only 4 of them. Don't read any of the others, because even though they may have good things in them, they will absolutely lead you astray. And he required the monks, the bishop did, when he finally had political power behind him, because Emperor Constantine had become a Christian by then, and instead of being persecuted, he was being flooded with imperial money and funds. He said, get rid of all those secret gospels. They are very bad. They're all wrong. The difference, the primary difference, as I see it, is that the gospels of now in the New Testament, as you know, are narratives. They all tell stories. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, of course, very similar because they're all based on Mark. John is an outlier, actually, later and completely different. These texts don't tell stories.
These were too weirdly shaped or odd to make the cut in a regular pack of bacon, but bacon is bacon.
And the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are presumed to be the teaching of Jesus when he spoke to thousands of people on the hills of Galilee, right? The public teaching. But if he taught as other rabbis did in the first century, and this is very much confirmed by the Oxford scholar who wrote about them.
So now look, if Jesus was born in the first century, right? I thought Jesus was supposed to be born, when they started calculating time after his death. Right? What happened to that time frame? Like, what year is 30 AD? It go back to the first century. That's when they created Jesus in the first century. Guess what the people was worshiping before Muslims? Before the Muslim religions and the Christianity and the Freemasons? Guess what people were worshiping? The sun, the moons, and the stars. Guess who knew about the sun and the moon stars? We did. But when the white man came in talking about, man, you could be reborn again. Jesus come from heaven. He created the sun and the moon and the stars. You can walk into any village right now with the book of God and explain to these people, man, this Jesus. Who is that? He was a king. He came to forgive you for your sins. And what if you go to the village? What sin that these people would be committing in the village? Hunting, breeding, living their best life in the jungle, and you got the white man saying, Jesus died for your sin, and make you feel like, damn, I got to be guilty. Oh, shit, what I done did? Man, look, you living your life wrong. All this what you doing it wrong. Listen to the word of Jesus. Then they got pictures show him on the cross and all this and give you a good ass story. You're gonna believe that shit too. Look.
I'll speak about him in a moment. The secret, the Gospels found at Nag Hammadi, which were in the library of the monastery, were the secret teaching of Jesus, not the public teaching. And if he taught as other rabbis did, he would have taught both ways. Rabbis still do that. They talk one way to the congregation, and then they will talk to their own personal disciples about advanced level teaching. So these weren't meant to replace the other gospels. They were meant to be supplemental, devotional material for people on an advanced level. And that's what they look like.
Yes, this idea of secret knowledge that's different from the public knowledge that Jesus professes is a key throughout the Gnostic themes. But before we jump into that, you talked about how Athanasius comes up with a scriptural canon and says any other gospel shouldn't be read. And so there are some theories that suggest that this is why these texts end up buried in this cave in Egypt, in Nag Hammadi, as you say. And it's a few thousand years later that...
So once you think about the pyramid of Egypt, none of that shit came from God. It was just all about them folks got exposed. That's why they build that shit in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. In stones and mountains. And once you go there, you will see what these people came up with. Oh, look at the writing on the wall. Look at the writing on the wall. What? So basically, you seen white people carve these stones because they advanced people. So one thing I can say, they probably meant this. They probably be from the goddamn the stars or some shit. Not the stars, but the aliens. Look.
These texts are discovered essentially by accident, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, apparently so. I mean, people go into those caves looking for burials and looking for.
So look at it like this here. Somebody, the New Testament and the Old Testament weren't supposed to be discovered. Well, they found other secret teachers in it. The reason why they preaching Jesus. The reason why they really winning souls. The real reason why they really going to war. That's where you get the all-seeing eye from. Cause check this out. You got one eye. A hermit got two eyes, right? But the Freemason on top of the pyramid got one eye. But they said this the all-seeing eye. That means if everybody wake up right now and realize, wait a minute. If Jesus was fake, I want to see it's proven. I want to actually see receipts on this. Cause if Jesus get exposed by being a character, and this would be the biggest cult ever, their kingdom gonna fall. That means nobody going to church, nobody ain't giving them money. You ain't fucking with their mind no more. You don't have people, cause when it come to Jesus, don't you know how much revenue Jesus bring in every Sunday all over the world? All over the world. Don't you know how much money Jesus bringing in? If it's enough to get a pastor rich and have 50 in the bank and he just own one church, just how mad is every church that's bringing in the world? So look, so basically, don't this sound like, oh, God say, I'm finna destroy this world and I'm finna kill everybody else on this world. But Noah, I'm going to spare you. So look, when I created this flood, right, you know what I'm saying? Boom. The boat gonna land, you know, build this ark and the boat gonna land here and all this old shit. But if you actually go and read why they don't want you to read like the Enoch book, the Book of Jubilee and all this, because he's gonna tell you that it was a man of war that flooded out his enemies out their land. You couldn't defeat them in war, so you had to flood them. This is what they did. They tried to poison some of the people, right? And flood them out the land because they got exposed. Look.
Things that were hidden there. And the story we get from one of the earliest persons who claims to have found it is that he was just digging around and he found this 6-foot jar which contained 13 leather-bound books. They're large, they're about that big. These large books. And they would have been...
It's about a foot or so just for our listeners. It's about a foot wide and a foot high.
Maybe 2 feet long and one wide. They would have been put on a lectern, most likely, and read by the reader that night, since some of the monks didn't read, during evening devotions. But as I said,
if you manage a team or run operations, this is going to save you so much time. I like to make tutorials my team can follow without...
I was just reading the work of someone who very much dislikes the secret gospels and writes against them. And there are many people in that group who says that they contradict the New Testament. Actually, as I said, they don't. They supplement it. And he claimed that there's no historical evidence for Jesus teaching that way. That is completely wrong. If you read the Gospel of Mark chapter 4 and ask, did Jesus have a secret teaching? Mark 4 says, before Mark 4, Jesus is talking to crowds on the fields. Then he's alone with his disciples, and he says, to you alone is given the secret, and the Greek word is mysterion, right? The mystery of the kingdom of God. But to people out there, everything is in parables. All I'm telling them is parables. And at the end of chapter 4 of Mark, he goes on telling parables and saying, I'm not telling them so people will understand my teaching. I'm telling them so they will not understand. I don't want them to understand what I'm telling you. So,
and this is in the Gospel of Mark. This is in the canonical Gospel that Christians today believe in.
Mark 4, 10, and 11. Jesus says, only you, I'm giving the secret teaching. But Mark doesn't tell you what it is.
Yeah.
The secret teaching is only included in these others. And that's one reason why the bishops didn't trust it. They said, well, nobody heard it except 1 or 2 people. How can you validate that? Well, you can't really.
Doesn't Paul say a similar thing in one of his letters about the idea of having discovered some secret knowledge that he can't relate to the readers of his epistles?
Oh, absolutely. You have it in 1 Corinthians 2. He says, among the mature, you know Greek at all? Among the people
Unfortunately not.
Among the mature people, he calls them the grown-ups. We speak wisdom. Divine wisdom hidden before the ages for our glory. Secrets, divine wisdom. That's
what the all-seeing eye about. Once you go back to the god of Odin, he sacrificed his eye for wisdom. That's teach in Freemasonry. That's why you got the all-seeing eye on the pyramid.
1 Corinthians 2, 10 to 16. But he says, I'm not telling you that. You people in Corinth are just babies. You're babies in Christ. I'm not going to tell you any of that stuff. So Paul keeps his secret wisdom to himself. And so did Jesus, except to certain disciples. But that is, if one believes the New Testament gospel, then I think Mark is as close as we get to the earliest witnesses of these stories.
And notice, ain't nobody never witnessed this shit but the people that walk with Jesus, that's characters. Made up. It's no historical fact on there. And they got everybody believe, if you believe Jesus was real, come to the Holy Bible. You mean to tell me I can't go to a hospital? Because they had hospitals at those times. Birth records. Shit, they even had a count on everybody. Look.
Jesus did teach secretly, but we don't have his secret teaching extant because it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be actually told orally, because then you could judge to whom you were speaking and the level of maturity of that person.
We'll get back to Elaine Pagels in just a moment, but first, a message. I'm speaking at a conference in Atlanta, Georgia this June. The conference is called Level Up, and it covers a wide range of topics, including philosophy, society, culture, art, and self-improvement. It's taking place between the 19th and 22nd of June 2024 in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm going to be in conversation with Craig Biddle about morality. Recent conversion to Christianity. Like these kinds of 12 in parables, so that, and then this is a quote of the prophet Isaiah, they may be ever seeing but never perceiving, and ever hearing but never understanding. Otherwise they might turn and be forgiven. So you're quite right. It's very, very strange. Jesus seems to be saying that he is deliberately speaking in parables so that people will not understand the true teaching of his message.
And if you go down to verse 31 of chapter 4, you'll see he'll say again, so that they will not understand. Ministers will say, oh, he speaks in parables to make it nice and simple for you. And Mark says, no, he makes it that way so you don't understand.
Yes, verse 33 to 34, with many similar parables, Jesus spoke the word to them as much as they could understand. He did not say anything to them without using a parable, but when he was alone with his own disciples, he explained everything.
The official hair of Hot Dad Summer. American Crew, man, you look good.
Hi, Mark Barden at Sandy Hook Promise here. When the gunman shot his way into Sandy Hook Elementary School on December 14th, 2012, he loaded his AR-15.
Correct. And what we judge is that the Gospel of Thomas, which is said to have been told to Thomas, the disciple, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene said to have been told to Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Philip, allegedly reported by Philip, many others are told and claim to be told by certain people. Many of the other texts found with and by the way, I'm sorry, you'll cut a lot of this. Of the more than 50 texts that were found, really only 4 or 5 of them should be called Gospels because they have that title inscribed next to the text. But others are revelation texts in which people speak with Jesus and receive secret revelation. There are many other kinds of texts, but they all claim to be secret teachings. Many of them claim to be secret teachings, except the texts in the collection, which aren't Christian. There are some that refer instead to the Greek gods. Some of them sound like they're written to Jewish writers or by Jewish writers. Some refer to Greek stories and myths.
There was a copy of, or a partial copy of Plato's Republic, I think, found amongst the Nag Hammadi library.
Yes, there is. There is. So it's quite miscellaneous in a way. But the primary find consists of what you call spiritual writings that you might find in a monastery library today, even.
Yes. And so these texts are then discovered by somebody who's digging in the desert, hits into this jar, and by some accounts is at first afraid to open it in case it contains a jinn or like a demon. And then finally thinks, well, maybe it's worth some money, opens it up, finds a bunch of papyrus, takes it home. I think his mother is alleged to have used some of it as fuel for her fire, like she kept it by the fire to feed the fire, and these would have been these ancient sort of non-canonical Christian manuscripts. And it's only after decades of people realizing their worth and then trying to smuggle them out of Egypt and trying to sell them back and forth that finally, again, we're talking about.
So basically, that's how the text got discovered. Somebody was doing something and stumbled up on a cave. Keep this in mind, that's why they started discovering this shit in caves. If you understand how the white people was moving, they was moving all over the world, carving out caves, you know what I'm talking about, worshiping, you know what I'm saying, this plotting about this Jesus thing and this idol taken all over the world, and people start discovering it. Just say you had this one family member in this part of the world. I got all this shit pulled up. Hold on. Is this it? Hold up. I got so much of this shit pulled up. If you go to Queen Elizabeth, the mother of Jesus, John the Baptist. You mean to tell me she was born in the 1st century? This supposed to be the 1st century. So the 1st century is before Christ. So that means Jesus, they made up Jesus' narrative. Jesus' narrative already was spread all over the world with books, items for people to find, and all of this to make it look like how this shit get spread all over the world. So once you go back, that's why once you go back to Mary, you don't got no family tree. So if this, Elizabeth, why you don't got her daddy listed or her parents? No parents. She don't have no parents. This Saint Elizabeth. If you go to the mother of Jesus, if you go to her parents, look who it go back to. This the granddad of Jesus and this his wife. If you go back to this image and go back and look at this, hold on, where I was at? Watch this. Look at the nose. So look, this is a made up image. So guess what they did? When they were scattering out this Jesus narrative, the people that knew what the secret was, that Jesus never exists and we know what's really going on, we're gonna paint him in our image since you started over here in Ethiopia. Oh yeah, and the Iranian was like, yeah, we're gonna say Jesus Middle Eastern. Middle Eastern. Then he fled to Israel. Then God say in the Genesis, you know what I'm saying, in the Old Testament, it's gonna be a son that's gonna save the world. through your bloodline, and she don't have no bloodline of Jesus. No bloodline of David or nothing. This just a random lady. Don't nobody can't verify. Nobody can't verify none of this shit. So she is not kin to David. Why would God say, I'm gonna bless you with the son of my God, with my son to save Israel and to die for everybody's sin? But he supposed to be, why God just didn't send him through the bloodline of King David? If he supposed to be prophesied. You see what I'm saying? So check this out. So basically, all the characters in the Bible were actually fake as hell. But the war was real between other kings. The war was real because they flooded that John now. So they giving you old wars that already exist so they can say this was God's work. Look.
About the 20th century here that these texts are finally translated and we're able to listen to them, we're able to read them ourselves. Where can we begin with trying to understand? I mean, interestingly, my idea of the Gnostic Gospels is that they sort of portray this different vision of Jesus, in particular the physicality of Jesus, whereas the canonical Gospels seem to emphasize a physical resurrection in many points. The Gnostics seem to believe in the non-physicality of Jesus and the creation of the material world by a separate entity, not the God of the universe. This is really interesting stuff, but I'm wondering if you can, as well as explaining a bit about that, tell us how that fits into your earlier supposition that these Gospels are supposed to sort of complement the canonical Gospels rather than contradict them.
Would this make you buy a Ridge wallet? Two people could win a Lamborghini Huracan Sterrato, a Hennessy Velociraptor, or $100,000? Hold on, let me explain.
Well, early on, we heard all of those kinds of allegations. These will be full of garbled things, full of passwords, full of weird heretical teachings. I was very struck that the Gospel of Thomas consists only, as you know, of 110 sayings of Jesus. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke, and Didymus Judas Thomas wrote them down. And those sayings, actually, half of them in Thomas, are identical, virtually identical, with what you find in Luke and Matthew. Love your brother. Blessed are the poor. The parable of the mustard seed. Half of it is identical. The other half are like Zen koans as I read them. I stopped reading when I found saying 70, which as I translate it reads, Jesus said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And I thought, oh, you don't have to believe that. It just happens to be true. And I took it psychologically as a powerful statement. But I realized later it's a theological statement because it's about the divine presence in the universe from which you and I and all of us are created. The divine energy from which everything came forth is perceived in the Gospel of Thomas as light. And what the Gospel of Thomas urges the advanced follower of Jesus to do is to look.
So this is what she basically doing. All she doing is this. We know who the real prophets was. They was made up. We know all of this is made up. But for the ones that don't believe it made up, that's why she gonna throw back the gospel. Hey, you know, because you can go back to Jesus. and listen to the word of God. But this coming from an image, a figure that don't speak. Right? So what she doing is she know all the gospel fake. If she know all the gospel fake, and she verified it at the same time that the gospels are fake. That's why the gospels don't line up. She know they fake. But this some shit, if you expose the real truth, Hollywood gonna crumble. No more presidents, no more nothing. You know what they're gonna start? A World War III. That's when the military gonna bomb, cause guess what you just cut off? Taxes. That's why Jesus, when he was talking to the tax collectors and the people, the bishops and the scribes, all this shit was made up. All this shit was made up, but about the tax collectors, that's why they had to just say Jesus said, yeah, just go to the lake and get it out the fish mouth of 10% and give them, because that's what they want. Come on, bro, look.
Look for the light within, which is a metaphor for the energy that comes from being connected with the source of the universe and its energy. I find it, if anything, I would say more pantheistic. But the idea that the world was created by an evil demiurge is the imposition of a completely different heretical system onto this text, which has nothing to do with it. There's nothing like that in Thomas at all. This is a text, really, which resembles nothing more than Jewish mysticism as Gentiles did not know it until the 15th or 16th century, when mystical texts from Kabbalah were published, I believe, from Spain, and people in France and England and Holland began to read them and were fascinated by Jewish mystical texts. We call it Kabbalah, which has a very similar view that in the beginning, God was a kind of divine source of divine light and energy, pouring energy into the darkness of the universe and bringing forth the beauty of the world, through which shines the divine energy everywhere. Once you learn.
That sounds like the sun, right? So when they say shine the light and all this is what people were believing and worshiping, the sun, because the sun gives life. These people came and changed the whole narrative and said Jesus is the light and painted the sun behind him.
How to see it. So it's, as I understand it, I've struggled to do that for 25 years. It's a mystical text.
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words.
I want to ask about this idea of the creator God of the material universe and the separation of Jesus. I mean, you're quite right. The Gospel of Thomas being quite a short collection of just quotes of Jesus. This is an imposed theology, if you think that's what the text means, perhaps, okay. But there are other non-canonical Gospels which quite clearly point to the idea that Jesus is specifically sent to save people from this material condition they find themselves in as being created by this evil God that is the creator of the material world, and Jesus is the sort of non-physical entity that comes to help us break free of that condition. Where do we find that idea in the Gnostic?
So that's a good question what he asked, because when I looked at all of this shit, that's why you have the other religions, you know, like the Muslims. So that's why they were trying to expose it. Like, well, look, since we know all this shit made up, we're going to expose who the devil is. So they really trying to say Jesus is the devil, even though he a made up character. right? Him, everybody else that come along with Jesus. Ain't this funny? If you go to history class, they'll teach you anything else instead of Jesus. They'll teach you, they'll even give you old wars that ain't got nothing to do with the Bible, but it got a lot to do with the Bible, but it's a lot of wars going on. The wars that was going on in real life, they trying to say there was the time when Jesus was born. And all this shit was going down. It was a completely totally another world then, bro. It was complete another world. Guess what they said about Adam and Eve and Jesus?
In the Gnostic collection.
Where I find that idea in Irenaeus, who can't stand these Gospels. He says, don't touch them. Don't even read them. Don't think about them. Because they're just the same as the false teacher Marcion. Marcion was not a Gnostic. He was, in a way, a literal Christian, a Gentile from Asia Minor, who became a Christian, and he read the New Testament. He said, oh, this is a message of love. But then he read the Hebrew Bible, and he said, but that God is vengeful and judgmental, and he created the world, and it's full of terrible things like death and mosquitoes, snakes, he mentioned.
Oh, he wasn't no God. Just look at him as a commando in the military. He got access to poisons, weapons, and he could cause a flood. He could cut water supply off. If America want to starve us right now, they can cut our water supply off. They already killed the animals that was on this land, so now you won't be able to hunt to survive, right? Look,
Those. That was declared a heresy very early. That, as I read it, has nothing to do with these texts. But Irenaeus wanted to condemn them. And so he said, oh, this is nothing but that same old heresy. I don't find that here. There are some texts in the collection which are not, well, I'd say some of the sources in the collection express a similar view that also you find in Jewish mysticism, that the divine energy behind the universe is not the character you almost find in Genesis and Exodus, judging the world, punishing people for touching the ark by condemning them to death and so forth. So it gets mixed up in the writings of the people who really are opposed to the idea that these secret gospels have any value. But I must add that only some of the texts from Nag Hammadi, for me, have this kind of spiritual power that Thomas does. Some of the others, the Treatise on Resurrection, for example. And there you mentioned something important. The Treatise on Resurrection belongs to this small group of texts that I find very spiritually powerful, because it's written by a teacher who's trying to explain to his pupil, what does Paul mean by resurrection? Do you have to believe that? Do you have to believe that?
Now, she said this text would teach to their own people, meaning the white man. Watch this shit.
That Jesus was dead and came back to life. And the Treatise on Resurrection interprets 1 Corinthians 15, Paul's teaching on resurrection. But Paul did not see Jesus come out of the grave.
Knowledge is trapped in people's heads. Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Scribe. We're on a mission.
Paul did not touch him. Paul never talks that way about Jesus coming out of the grave. Paul says, there I was, traveling to Syria. And suddenly I saw this brilliant light in the sky, and I fell down and I was blinded by it.
So Paul was a made up character. This what they did. When they made up Paul character, right? They gave him the wrong timestamp when he supposed to be actually was born. That means they got Paul born after Jesus. After his death. How would Paul ever walk with Jesus if he was born after his death? Now all this shit made up. But he supposed to walk with God in the New Testament, and Jesus telling him to write all this shit down. What I'm about to do, you know, I'm finna raise people from the dead. I'm finna do all this, write all this shit down. But Paul never walked with Jesus. The Bible was already in play at that time. If you made the character of Jesus, why they already had testaments in the Bible? Shortly after his death. There's some of the people that's not even supposed to be allegedly born yet. So once I figured that out, I said, oh, this just proved right here. These people don't exist. It's a fabricated story, but your religious belief is so strong in this, you're going to go back to a gospel scripture. And this the best thing you can do. Once you go back to those Bible scriptures, everything what she finna say, exposed it all. Look.
And I heard Jesus speaking to me and saying, Saul, why are you doing this? Why are you persecuting me? And I said, who are you? And he said, I am Jesus whom you're persecuting. You know the story. So he said, I saw this light. I heard this voice. Jesus spoke to me. That's how I saw him. And if you read Paul's views on resurrection, he talks about this physical body must be transformed into an invisible body. This material must be transformed into imperishable. We have to be transformed. And the resurrection is a transformation, not a resurrection of a physical body, which is what the church doctrine becomes. If you know, the creed of the church, it talks about the resurrection of the body and the life of the world to come. That is not Paul's teaching. It's the teaching of the synoptic gospels, which do talk about Jesus was in that grave. He came out of it. We touched him. We felt him. There he was. Mark says it. Well, in the.
Hold on. Watch this, y'all. Check this out.
I'd like to talk about this, not just the concept of women in the Gnostic texts, which, as you say, are treated quite differently from the canonical text, but also just the influence of the feminine itself in the actual theology of these Gnostic texts. I mean, you have a chapter in your book about God the Mother versus God the Father. What's that all about? Can you tell me about one of the texts that we haven't mentioned yet, which I found particularly fascinating, which is the so-called Testimony of Truth, which involves the retelling of the story of Genesis and the creation of the world, and the identification of the serpent as, well, let's say something other than evil.
Yes, that is. It's some of these texts are really have a sort of animosity and have a hostile view of Jewish tradition, or think that it's giving the wrong message. And this text takes the Adam and Eve story and turns it upside down and say, well, you think Eve is the sinner, but actually Eve is the luminous intelligence that illuminated Adam. Eve is the spiritual teacher. And it goes on to say that the serpent, which was cursed by God, is actually Christ. That comes from the beginning of the Gospel of John. Do you know in the first chapter it says the serpent?
So y'all heard this? That come from the Gospel of John, that Jesus is the serpent. He's going to be the Antichrist, right? Listen to this shit, and this shit in the Bible. This is secret teaching, because Jesus was trying to teach in purpose. He teaching the public something else, but teaching the secrets, you know what I'm saying, in the cave. But it ain't Jesus, it ain't the disciples, it's the peoples, the puppet masters behind this. I never looked at it the way how she finna explain about Adam and Eve and Jesus was the serpent, and she finna go back to the Gospel of John. I mean Paul. Look, listen to this shit.
It was lifted from, and it goes on to say that the serpent, which was cursed by God, is actually Christ. That comes from the beginning of the Gospel of John. Do you know in the first chapter it says, the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up on the cross. And that image there is the physician's staff, right? The serpent around it with a snake around it, which is a symbol of wisdom. And the symbol of the god Asclepius, the god of healing. So here, Jesus is identified as the serpent who heals when people look upon the staff. It's an inversion of the story, saying the serpent is actually teaching Adam and Eve wisdom. He says, eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. That is what you need to do. It's only the limited God who doesn't want you to become wise.
So this is another text that has an idea of the God of the Genesis story as
The main reason I keep coming back to shop with Misfits Market is for these pretzel pieces. In the process of coating pretzels in chocolate, a portion of them get broken, and we happen to think these broken pieces are even better than the original. Not only do they have a better chocolate to pretzel ratio,
as an evil god.
As an inferior God, at least you could say. Yes. And there are quite a few of those. Yes. I think a lot of Gentiles in the ancient world found the Hebrew Bible a very strange text. This God is a judge. He's harsh. He's judgmental. He stays only with his own people. He does many striking and negative things. If anyone touches the ark that is his dwelling, he strikes them dead. So there were many negative views about Judaism in the ancient world. And some positive ones, but you find some of those in these texts. You're right.
So these Gnostic texts, which talk about Jesus as the serpent, already a sort of a marvelous and incredibly subversive idea, but then also this inferior God who's trying to prevent Adam and Eve from attaining spiritual knowledge. Are we looking at a kind of polytheism here then, or maybe a kind of henotheism, that is multiple gods, but one God is better and above all others? Like, how should we interpret the theology of these texts?
Well, I don't think there's a single way at all. I mean, some of them might fit into a kind of polytheistic mode, but more often you find, at least in the texts that follow this kind of model of Jewish mysticism, you find different beings named as the divine. So that's why I can't speak about these 50-some texts as if they spoke with a single voice, because they really don't. And as I said, I do play favorites. There are some that I think are much more worth our time than others. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, for example. You know that the Gospel of John is always talking about Jesus coming into the world to die for the sin of the world, right? That's John's whole pitch, is about the sin of the world that has to be expunged by Jesus dying on the cross. The Gospel of Mary, somebody says to Mary Magdalene, here seen as a visionary, what is the sin of the world? And she says, there is no sin of the world. But sin is something you do when you do harm. So there are Christians who absolutely discard John's view. And they also encourage you to look at secret teaching and visionary teaching and teaching that is symbolic, in which the meaning is not always on the surface. That's what esoteric teaching is about. You know, every tradition, as you know, whether it's Hindu.
So watch this. Let's go to the serpent. Crushing the serpent head. Now this in the book of Genesis. God's announced the serpent head will be crushed by the seed of woman. Which was meaning, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be a prophecy, right? Keep this in mind. This is what this man had in mind. He said, I will crush in between you and the one before her seed and her, and he shall bruise your heel. Thy head and thou shalt be bruised. Now this supposed to be Jesus at the time. Now y'all see how they try to make it look like all this shit made up. But the whole message is Jesus really the Antichrist. If he is made up and they gave you images, nobody in the world never witnessed a death. Nobody never in the world never heard nothing about Jesus until religions got started. And guess who is the founder of religions? The Jews. Look, check this out. They even got this in Revelation. Verse truly is fascinating, provided that the first biblical glimpse of God's plan was redeemed. Focus, you know what I'm saying? Satan into the eternity. Check this out. Once you look at Moses was designed, he was the speaker as Jehovah. Now Moses is a Muslim. According to the Bible, guess where he from? I mean, guess where he was preaching at? Egypt. You see what I'm saying? The Hebrew term. Guess I learned this. Don't y'all know they had us thinking that Hebrew is the first language in the world. Come to find out, Hebrew really stands for a man that don't have land of his own and he out to conquer land. So check this out. Once you go to Yahweh, don't y'all be like, look, what's Jesus' real name? You know, his real name is Yahweh. If you type in Yahweh and go to Google, why they got him in the clay stones and tablets and they were worshiping Yahweh, but that's not Jesus. It's an idol. It's an idol. The letter J wasn't even invented yet. So boom, he was designed of the self-creator, existing creator, who will form all special. Man, you know what?
Jehovah's remarks in Genesis 3 verse 15 are addressed to the serpent immediately, though to Satan ultimately. Cf. Romans 16 verse 20. Modernists dismiss the clear import of the biblical record. They allege that Satan is but a personification of the self-accusing conscience of Israel. Gray, for point 40-298. However, both testaments of the sacred volume treat him as the personal archenemy of Almighty God. He is the murderer of fallen humanity, John 8 verse 44, Romans 5 verse 12. Following his malicious deed, this curse from Jehovah God previews the devil's horrible destiny.
So this is in the Bible. They basically said in the Bible, Jesus is the serpent. And he fulfilling the prophecy when you go back to Genesis. Yeah, we finna start, let us make man in our image. Remember that Bible verse? When he said, let's make man in our image, that's what exactly they did. This what they did. They was artists and painters. And you could fool a lot of world with pictures.
Destiny. The woman. The woman of the context is Eve. But the main focus is not upon her. Rather, it is upon her seed. See below. On the other hand, while there is mention of the serpent seed, the primary thrust is toward the destruction of the malignant force working through the serpent, i.e. Satan, rather than upon this enemy's seed, though certainly they will share his fate. Matthew 25.
And certainly, that means that the devil gonna carry his seed through the woman, paint you the image of Jesus, and he gonna win it, and we're gonna share his faith. And that's in Matthew. That's the secret teaching. Look.
Matthew 25, verse 41. The enmity. The term enmity denotes a disposition of hostility, whether between individuals, Numbers 35 verses 21 to 22, or between bodies of people, Ezekiel 25 verse 15, 35:5. Between what parties is there enmity, as suggested in this text? While some see it as an abiding antipathy between humans and snakes, Owen 13.
That's how you finna identify the snake. So basically what it's saying, if you read your Bible again, the way the preacher taught, the serpent, that's why we in sin, cause the serpent done tricked Eve and she tricked Adam and the snake, you know what I'm saying, say, yeah, eat from this tree of life and you will live forever. And nobody ain't never thinking about that's Jesus, because the preacher never taught that to us, and we just don't read and study our Bible like how we supposed to. But as to what I learned, it'll be well worth it to study the Bible again, because once you study it again, you know what will happen? The first thing you will do is throw it in the garbage can. That's what you're gonna do. You're gonna throw it in the garbage can, and you're gonna realize, be like, damn, I've been tricked by the serpent. Look.
13. Clearly the scope moves far beyond such a trite explanation. The language denotes the initial spirit of antagonism between Eve and her adversary, her destroyer, together with the suggestion that there would be a spiritual hostility developing between the woman's seed, Christ, along with his people, and Satan and his followers. This theme is well illustrated in the parable of the tares. See Matthew 13 verses 24 to 30, 36 to 43. Cf. 1 John 3 verse 10. Jehovah's action. The text represents Jehovah as saying, I will put enmity. How is the origin of this hostility to be attributed to God, who is an absolutely holy being? Isaiah 6 verse 3, Revelation 4 verse 8. There are two components. First, there is a standard of truth and righteousness which proceeds from the very nature of deity. Second, rational individuals are creatures of moral responsibility. When men or spirit beings, e.g., angels, exercise their volition and rebel against the Creator, enmity is bound to result. God, then, is the author of the enmity only in the sense that he makes demands upon responsible beings, which frequently they choose to ignore. CFX 7:3 FF. Woman's seed. Who is the woman's seed? Simply her descendants? Or is Christ involved? An affirmative answer to the first question is not plausible. Clearly, the seed promise of this entire book, Genesis 22 verse 18, cf. Galatians 3 verses 8 and 16, finds its complete fulfillment in the Savior who, in the fullness of time, was born of woman, Galatians 4 verse 4. Sometimes the claim is made that Genesis 3 verse 15 is a precise prophecy of the virgin birth of Jesus, since the phrase seed of woman appears to be unique. In the normal conception process,
Now y'all heard that? Man, now y'all heard that shit, bruh. So if you read the book of Genesis again and go to what God said, that sounds like the same person. That sounds like this was his intention was in the beginning, and to win over everybody, he got to come like, yeah, you know, I'm here to save the world. Look.
It is alleged the male provides this seed. Will this argument stand the test of candid investigation? Frankly, it will not. The seed of Hagar is mentioned later in the book, 1610, as is also the seed of Rebecca, 24 hours, 60 minutes, and yet no virgin births were involved in those cases. The expression does not exclude a virgin birth, but the grammar alone does not establish it. Lewis, 11. E.F. Kevin once carefully noted, it is not right to infer the virgin birth from the Protevangelion, but it is certainly quite legitimate to look back from the point of view of the virgin birth and see how marvelously close were the words of promise to the mode of the performance. 80. H. L. Ellison goes so far as to say that not until the virgin birth could the full implication of the promise be understood. Cf. Isaiah 7 verse 14.
So the Old Testament was made up, and it was all about somebody played God and then wrote a book and spread this book all over the world with pagan images and all of this, so you can believe in the idol of a picture. Look.
Isa, 17:138. The conflict. In the common versions, the term bruise is twice found. Satan bruises the seed's heel. The woman's seed bruises the serpent's head. Some translators prefer to render the first instance as bruise or strike at, NIV, while rendering the latter term by crush, Beck. Steigers, 78. The reason for the difference, in the minds of some scholars, is twofold. Some contend that the Hebrew verb swp, bruise, occurs twice in this verse, but that contextual considerations suggest a varied rendering. A man can crush a snake's head, while the snake can only bruise, or wound, the man's heel, without the action necessarily being permanent. The translation should conform, they suggest, to the nature of the circumstances. Others allege that the text actually contains similar, though different, words. Steigers argues that crush and bruise represent a play on two Hebrew words that look alike, as though from the same root. But bruise is from...
Shit, with that being said, that just confirmed this coming from the same person. And they talking about the same thing. They talking about Jesus and the God. I mean, Jesus and the devil is the same person. That's all it's proven. Look.
From Suf, whereas crush is from Soph, an allied root, Steigers, 79. See also Harris, et al., 912. Van Gemeren, 67. Atkinson sums up. Whatever the exact meaning of the verb, the picture seems to be clear. To bruise the head is a picture of fatal and final destruction. To bruise the heel is a picture of damage, which is neither fatal nor final.
And that's what it's finna lead back to this. Pictures and images. That's why you see, you know what I'm saying, when they come to slavery, they always show you black people in chains and all this. When they show you Jesus, they show him peaceful, and you know what I'm saying, and show you good sides of Jesus. Right? See that? So the whole time, he would be throwing up the same thing that Lucifer would be throwing up. If you look at who the Baphomet is, ain't the Baphomet threw up this same sign with the horns? With the horns. Look. This same sign, this is what the Baphomet threw. So what they did, all these pictures were just pictures to convince you that Jesus was real. You see him holding the Bible. You see he got the sun over his head. This picture is thousands and thousands of years ago, which it is. But look how when God said, I'm going to paint man in our image. So what they did was just paint a Jesus after their likeness. And then when they spread the gospel all the world to like Ethiopia, exactly, Ethiopia paint Jesus after their image. Right? Then you got people painting an African Jesus. Oh, he black. Well, it's pictures of him in Ethiopia. These pictures way older than this picture. Now we got the other pictures when you know what I'm saying, when they were this skin color. That's how they would convince the world. Look. This to show you the travel route. If you go to this picture, man, they was in Ethiopia. It started right here. As they was going up, look, as they was going up, heading towards Egypt, they became enslaved. The reason why they became enslaved, because look at the teaching they was following on the way. So look, on the way in Egypt, they weren't having none of this shit. They enslaved those people. So think about when Moses came to Egypt and said, let my people go. Guess who had them in slavery? The Egyptians. Right? So guess what? Remind y'all when Noah said they parted the sea, the Red Sea, and killed the people that was following them. Think about Noah's flood. You see that? So look. So what they did, they flooded this part out where they was enslaved from, right? Came up here, still teaching the gospel, won souls, and once they came back, when the land dried up, they rebuilt it. And once they rebuilt it, you got pyramids. And guess what they did? They came back to Ethiopia and preached them the gospel. See what I'm saying? It started off with Muslim first. It started off with Muslim. So when they first started out right here, bruh, they had everybody worshiping Muslim. Moses, Muslim. That's when you look, boom. When Moses went here, Muslim. So how Jesus gonna fulfill Moses' prophecy if he was a Muslim and he's descended of God? Come on, man. Come on, man. Symbols, tools of faith. Don't they say they're gonna paint pictures? So look how innocent this look when you go think about your faith. You looking at these pictures like, man, look at these pictures, man. They ain't nothing but angels. These people don't sin at all. Look, they the holy people in the world. All these pictures. Look, imagery. Look, this the paint they use. Watch this. This the paint they use, right? Here go the people that be painting this shit. Look. Inside of an icon workshop in Russia. Look. They paint them out their own likeness right today. See that? Now look at this. That's the same thing the Bafia throw. Now, Jesus got his hair braided. That's how they got everybody to believe. Watch this.
51. In the final analysis, we must say that the complete biblical picture does reveal a difference in the significance of the terms. Christ's death for human sin was, in effect, a wound rendered by Satan. But the Lord's resurrection, exaltation, and final victory will destroy the devil's revolting efforts. Romans 8 verses 20 to 21, 1 Corinthians 15 verse 26, Colossians 2 verse 15, Hebrews 2 verse 14, 1 John 3 verse 8, Revelation 20 verse 10. Great truths taught. There are a number of important points that we would make in concluding this discussion. These are practical points from which we may learn and enhance our own spiritual lives. Consider the following. Satan, a real enemy. There is the fact that Satan is a real enemy and a formidable opponent. He lied to Eve, and he murdered the human family, John 8 verse 44. He is the ever-tempting one, Matthew 4 verse 3, a present tense participle, who, as our adversary, continuously is on the prowl for those whom he may devour, 1 Peter 5 verse 8. Nothing could please him more than for liberal theologians to dismiss him as a mythological metaphor. Elsewhere, we have discussed the history and mission of Satan in greater detail, Jackson, 103 to 111. Not a myth or legend. Allegations that the serpent story is a mere legend are based upon anti-supernatural presuppositions. The God who fashioned all creatures certainly could, for a special occasion, empower a serpent to speak, just as in the case of Balaam's donkey, Numbers 22 verse 28. The inspired Paul viewed the episode as strictly historical, 2 Corinthians 11 verse 3. There also is archaeological evidence that connects the serpent image with man's original fall. A seal was discovered at ancient Nineveh depicting a man and woman on either side of a fruit tree. To the left of the woman stands a serpent. Dr. Ira Price of the University of Chicago suggested that it likely portrayed an early tradition of the fall of man, 89. Serpents have been associated with the destruction of human immortality in several ancient cultures, Handy 1114. Such traditions, though distorted, may be traced ultimately to the historical events of Eden. A preview of Christ. Genesis 3 verse 15 is a preview of the incarnate Christ. The expression seed of woman implies humanity. The virgin would conceive and bear a son. Isaiah 7 verse 14. Note, the reference is not to Isaiah's son, as some erroneously allege, Owen 13. Indeed, a child would be born, a son given, Isaiah 9.
So that means if the devil is Jesus and Jesus said, hey, I'm going to give you wisdom and knowledge, and boom, and he going to be struck on the head. Because when he gets struck on the head, so his whole agenda was to destroy the world. So when he come in Jesus form, so that's why Jesus had to, oh man. So that's why in the Old Testament, you got the serpent and the Christ, and you got Jesus fulfilling this prophecy. in the book of Genesis, cause he telling you, if you read the Genesis again and you go back to the chapters, it's all him then. It's all him. And he's not even a real person. So basically, if it's basically what it's saying, Trey Gang done draw the activator. I got an activator, right? My avatar, I mean. And that would be my seal or my avatar. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, man. We finna go to war, and this my seal and symbol. This what it look like.
Isa, 9:6. The Apostle John, of course, notes that the eternal Word became flesh and dwelt among the human family, John 1 verse 14. There are tremendous reasons for the necessity of the Redeemer being human, not the least of which is the fact that a spirit being cannot die a physical death, cf. 1 Timothy 6 verse 16. But Jesus partook of the nature of humanity, that through death he might bring to naught him that had the power of death, that is, the devil, Hebrews 2 verse 14.
That's in Hebrews. And that's in Hebrew. Whoa!
Hebrews 2 verse 14. The suffering of Christ. The allusion to the woman's seed being bruised unquestionably looks to the suffering of Christ on behalf of the sins of humanity. In Isaiah 53, there is a vivid portrait of Jehovah's abused servant, the Christ, cf. Luke 22 verse 37, Acts 8 verses 32 to 35. Twice the prophet speaks of the promised Messiah being bruised, Daka, and wounded as an offering for sin, 53:5.
Man, come on, bro. So you mean to tell me that y'all heard this in the scriptures and this feelings of prophecy in the book of Genesis, and you mean to tell me you don't see what's happening here? Them folk had a game plan. Them folk had an Old Testament and a New Testament and have everybody believe in, but the whole game is to control us, put us in slavery, and break ourselves and give them the money. Look.
5:10. The death of Jesus, planned even before the foundation of the world. 1 Peter 1 verses 19 to 20.
So, why would Jesus' death will be already planned before the foundation of the world? Come on, bro. Man, I'm glad that you mentioned the book of Revelation. If you go back to the Revelation again, the Revelation ain't nothing but a scare tactic. If you don't have faith in Jesus right now, you going to hell and the angels gonna come and they're gonna destroy everybody in the world. That don't sound like God no more. You see what I'm saying? Why would God plan Jesus death before he created the world? Shit. In the book of Peter?
1 Peter 1 verses 19 to 20 was previewed in this miniature gospel. Incidentally, this symbolic prophecy of the death of Christ is in conflict with certain dispensational allegations, namely, that the Lord's death was not a part of heaven's original plan. S. D. Gordon, in his book Quiet Talks About Jesus, wrote, "It can be said at once that his dying was not God's own plan. It was conceived somewhere else and yielded to by God." 85. Absurd. Resurrection implied. The fact that only Christ's heel, in contrast to the serpent's head, was to be injured, obviously alludes to the Lord's resurrection from the dead. Jesus' death would not terminate the divine mission. Human alliance with Satan. The allusion to the serpent's seed ominously predicts that many of the human family would choose to be aligned with Satan, rather than with the Son of God. This stands in bold relief to the modern notion that all men basically are good and are, therefore, perfectly at liberty to pursue the course of their own interests in life with heaven's approval. Genesis 3 verse 15 contradicts universalism. Victory over Satan. The prophecy reveals that the glorious cause of the woman's seed would prevail ultimately. Satan and his forces will be crushed.
So when I read this out of all that research, what I done did, this what's finna happen. When they said victory over Satan, when they said Satan and his forces will be crushed, guess what they mean? If you if you really believe in God, in Jesus, right? Do it for Jesus then. If you believe in Jesus, do it for Jesus. Say I believe in Jesus and I don't believe none of this shit. Go look at that Bible again. Once you go look at that Bible again and look at those scriptures again, the prophecy is being fulfilled. But the only thing that can crush Satan, if you wake up and study for yourself and be like, wait a minute, I look at the Bible more differently now, and this will crush Satan. If everybody find out that Jesus was fabricated, the Bible was fabricated, you will understand why you go to church every Sunday, giving out your tithes. That's why you following the law. That's why they got, you know what I'm saying? If you crush, they will lose everything. It won't be no more church. Nobody won't go to church after this one. Satan has fallen. All taxes is over with. It's over with. They finna lose trillions and trillions of dollars behind this shit, cause Jesus bring them money. Think about how much money Jesus bring to a church. Right? Not only that, you gets up in the morning and half of y'all pray to Jesus. Then look, you could be going by your day and something could happen to you. It could have been something like you could have found $100 and you be like, thank you, Jesus. Like Jesus really bless you with $100. Shit happens sometimes. You see, if you pick a quarter up, you know what I'm saying, out the ground, you think Jesus bless you with that money? Cause look who owned the money. The same people that wrote the Bible. Same people that wrote the Bible. And guess what happened? If everybody wake up and find out, Satan and his force will be crushed. And don't you want to know what will really happen? They gonna kill us, bruh. They gonna get the military, bomb everybody. It's gonna be a World War III. That's why we had the constitutional right. And just in case for this shit. Look, Freemasonic finna get exposed. Cause Freemasonic the one that wrote the Bible. It's a family business. Somebody actually sat down and thought about this shit like, damn. Since everybody worshiping the sun, we need everybody to worship the Son of God. Somebody got high with thinking about acting as God. So once you heard this shit,
Buddhist, Muslim, what else? They all have a secret teaching, esoteric teaching, mystical teaching, and public teaching. Christianity in the beginning, in the 4th century, the bishops tried to eliminate mystical teaching. because it meant that you could have a vision. I could have a vision that would contradict what the church was setting up as pure, true dogma.
So she basically was saying, like, damn, if you think outside the box, you're going to be like, hey, you're going to question the church. You're going to question your belief.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Did you know that Mint's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back?
Who is that?
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here.
Is God. Always.
So check this out. So this is what the man did. They was carving out mountains. They was cavemen. When they came to Babylon, Egypt, notice they got horses. They own horses.
His God. It is an insult to our God, Bel-Marduk. But Nebuchadnezzar, your father, does not forbid it.
If you would kill me for speaking out, then kill me. How much suffering?
That's why when they was in Egypt, that's why they was already wearing crosses, stars, robes. And if they was staying in Egypt, in Babylon, look how they were dressed up, bro. Bro, this look like cavemen and Santa Claus. This in Babylon. Remember y'all the Bible tablet? Look at the characters. This is Iran. This is where they taught Muslims at. See that? So that's what they were doing in caves. That's what they were doing in caves. Now you see how they watching the eclipse? That's the eclipse. Look, that's the eclipse, the solar system, right? Watch this. Let's watch this shit before that. So everybody finna stop fighting and know that this is an E clip. So now look, everybody know, and nowadays that's the eclipse. So look how everybody stop and notice that, like, damn, what the fuck? So look, that's the first time they ever seen some shit like that.
Prophecy was fulfilled.
Oh, the prophet must be fulfilled. And we get this shit like every couple of years, don't it? So this what the Jews look, this what the white man looked like in Babylon. That's why you don't see no Iranians. You ain't gonna see no Iranians. So they came up and gave Iranians the Muslim belief. And when they fled to Israel, they started Christianity. And once they started Christianity, they already had their secret family thing, which is just the Freemasons.
What I found is that
hold on, what that John there? What that John there? Hold up. I ain't saved that John. What that John there? Oh, watch this. Here we go. Listen to this.
Because you have things like ghettos, you have things like starvation, you have things like concentration camps, you have things like the planned, systematic extermination of people. Now, a lot of people talk about the banality of evil. There was a real cold detachment, industrialized murder of Jews and others during the Holocaust. What's so disturbing about what Israel is doing and the IDF is doing is that they are doing it with glee. And unlike the Nazis, they're not hiding it. And we know this because they document this. They document not just the war crimes.
All of this comes down to the claim that this is the Jewish homeland and that they have every right to be there, that they're the indigenous people, and that the people who are there are these Arabs who've come from other places and that they shouldn't be there. And so I want to play this for you. This is Naftali Bennett. He has been the opposition of Netanyahu. He's many think would be the next prime minister. And yet these are the types of things he believes. He has this 3-minute, he says this is a 3-minute why 3 minutes of the history of Jews and Zionism. Let's watch what he has to say, and then we're going to break it down.
I'll do something I've never done, and I'll try in 3 minutes to do the history of Jews and Zionism, starting now. The Jewish people first entered the land of Israel 3,300 years ago, and everyone can read that in the Bible. Assuming you don't believe the Bible, then you can look at archaeology, which shows evidence of about 3,000 years ago. There's no dispute that.
Hold on a second. I want to pause this. Let me just go ahead and do a pause. So let's back this up just for a second. So he says, let's go ahead and play
the Bible, then you can look at archaeology. Jewish people first entered.
There it is. The Jewish people first entered. So he's saying the Jewish people first entered.
Jewish people first entered the land of Israel 3,300 years.
Okay, so they came from somewhere else, right? So he's going to tell us this is why the Jewish people belong here. This is why these other people don't belong here. And he's saying, first of all, the people were here. They came to the land 3,300 years ago. And if you don't believe the Bible, then you can believe archaeology. They came to the land 3,000 years ago. So there were people already there. This wasn't, in the Bible, it even says this wasn't like desolate, just empty land. There were people that were there, the Canaanites, and that Abraham showed up with his family. So where does scholars say Abraham came from? Well, scholars say that, says the Bible states that Abraham was raised in Ur of the Chaldeans. Most scholars agree that that area was the Sumerian city of, anyway, they say it's about the city where Abraham comes from is about 200 miles southeast of Baghdad. I can't pronounce all the names, but 200 miles southeast of Baghdad in lower Mesopotamia in what is now modern day Iraq. So he comes from Iraq. That's where Abraham comes from. That's where the Jewish people come from, because it was Abraham's children. He had 13 children, 12 of them boys, one of them a girl. So there was the 12 tribes of Israel. And that's the Jewish people. Some of that is the Jewish people. So they didn't even come from there, but he's admitting that, but he's saying, but let's keep watching.
And everyone can read that in the Bible. Assuming you don't believe the Bible, then you can look at archaeology, which shows evidence of about 3,000 years ago. There's no dispute that the Jewish people founded their first commonwealth, the Kingdom of David, 3,000 years ago. It was destroyed. We were kicked out. We came back, founded the second Commonwealth of Israel, which went on for several hundred years. And again, it was destroyed, this time by the Romans. Jews stayed in Israel, but few Jews stayed in Israel. The rest of the Jews were kicked out to all across the world. And every day they prayed 3 times a day that they want to return to Israel. And it was
okay. So let's pause right there for just a second. So he says the Jews stayed in Israel, so a few Jews stayed in Israel. The rest of the Jews were kicked out all across the world. Okay, where did the Jews go? So the 10 lost tribes. So there were the 12 tribes of Israel were actually 13 tribes, because one of the tribes was actually split into 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. So there's 13 tribes effectively. Most of them were lost. There were a couple of them that remained. We know the history of those people and they were the Jewish people that stuck around, that were there. We know that there's.
So basically, make a long story short, the white man was in caves. They came from Ethiopia and fled to Iranian and spread the Muslim belief and won some souls. So once the Muslim belief found out what was going on, they fled to Israel. Once they fled to Israel, that's how you finna get Christianity. So Christianity ain't nothing but a copy of the Holy Quran. Only difference is you got the Muslim version of the Holy Testament. So basically, when they said they were scattered out all across the land, that's why you found all those caves. Once you found all those caves, now you see why they were finding shit in those caves or some shit left behind. Just that if you were living in the cave with your family and you left some stone tablets behind and people found those stone tablets and it's dating back to 3,000 and 1,000 years old, and you'll be like, oh, look what we found. We found something ancient. So this got to be true that this shit existed. But the whole time what you really found is what these people had planned for religion. So basically when they were scattered out all over the world, Google this. How many Jews live in the United States? 5 million. How many in other states? 100,000 there. They scatter all over the world.
Those people were there. The 10 lost tribes, however, let me just read this to you. The king of Assyria captured Samaria and he carried them away to Assyria and placed them in Hala and on the harbor, the river of Gozan and the cities of Medes. So in the years 722 to 721 BC, the 10 tribes who comprised the northern kingdom of Israel disappeared, conquered by the Assyrian king. They were exiled to Upper Mesopotamia, today modern Syria and Iraq. So they're Arabs. So these are the 10 lost tribes. They weren't lost like they disappeared into nothingness. They were lost in that they lost their identity. They lost their Jewishness. They lost their the religion that they believed. They lost their ancestral identity. They don't know who they are anymore.
What? They don't look. They didn't look. So that's why they came up with a new identity and a new religion. So they had us thinking that we the lost tribe, and because we the lost tribe, because it talks about Africa and all of this, so it got to be black people, and that's why they call us Black African American, because they just can't identify what part of Africa, but really they know who you is. Look.
Meaning they are not Jewish people who identify as Jewish. And we know from these stories that they were carried off to Syria and Iraq, meaning that the Arabs who then would come back into the area would be potentially these very people who are actual descendants of Abraham, if you believe all of that, right? So let's keep going what he has to say. But where are those people? They weren't all around the world. They were carried. You couldn't travel all around the world very easily in that era. You made it just a little ways away. And many of them made it into what would later become Arab land.
It's a pretty lousy 2,000 years, pogroms, Holocaust. But about 150 years ago, secular Jews, primarily Herzl, Jabotinsky, and others, took the initiative. Let's come back to our own homeland. The Jews are the indigenous people of the land of Israel.
No, they're not. He admitted that right up front. Up front, he said the Jewish people first came to the area of Israel 3,300 years ago. That means they're not from there. We know where they're from. According to historians, Abraham, if you believe all of this, is from Iraq. So they're Iraqis, and yet they're taking this other piece of land rather than Iraq, but maybe Iraq's next. I don't know. And then he's saying that these are the indigenous people. We know that they're not. He's saying that Herzl, who was an Austrian, took the initiative to go back to the homeland. But what we know is that there were periods of time it's not common now to convert to Judaism, but there were periods of time where there were massive conversions to Judaism. For example, the Romans, during the Roman times, there was quite a bit of conversion to Judaism. Take into consideration, 10% of their population was Jewish. Many of them had converted to Judaism. Compare that to the United States, where the population of the Jewish population here is like 4% or something really small. So in the Roman.
So now look, this is what I learned. That's why the Roman Empire was so heavily associated with Africa. If this was never flooded right here, if they never would have flooded this shit, this would be land. So it would make sense that Africa would be heavily associated with Israel, with Spain, Italy, you know what I'm saying, and all of this, right? But since they flood the land and now let's try to wipe out the population. So this Iranian, this is a part of Africa. If you put land right here, all of this was man-made. This one thing I learned. This how they separated the land. They flooded this on purpose. It's like a border wall, right? It's like a border wall, but this land is connected, bro. If you calculate how deep this here is not deep at all. So somebody carved her and carved her and flooded that giant. Flood this land and then flood all of this, because you don't want nobody to know that, yeah, that's why white people was in Africa in those days. That's why white people were in Africa all those days. And then what they did, they was breeding, having sex with Africans, create the Muslim religion. They created all of this shit. Muslim. And when they get to this little bitty town, Israel, they say that's the holy city. You want to know why that's the holy city? Because guess what you could do? If you think like a military or colonel or something, this would be the perfect place that you want to be in, because you could transport all your cargo goods. They got to come through here to supply the city. It just say if you want to start a war, you can start a war by cutting the water off. You can just cut the water off from right here. All this finna dry back up. All this gonna dry back up, and this gonna turn back into land. Right? But if you keep it going and can control it, hold on, y'all. So when I was showing y'all Odin, the story behind the symbols, this is where you get Freemasonry from. Remind y'all when the book they said, yeah, you know he gonna be riding on the white pale horse. You know, you're gonna have him ride on the red horse, the white horse. Remember the apocalypse? He's gonna be the God of battle, the God of victory, the God of prophecy. What? He's the God of prophecy. Ain't that's a lot in the Bible? And there's a lot of battles in the Bible, and there's a lot of victories in the Bible, and there's a lot of magic, poems, and wisdom in the Bible. This the Nordic God, known to be a wanderer. What? How did he lose his eye? So once this who the God that we was praising to, right here. That's the God in the Bible that spoke. That's the God that chose Israel to be his promised land. That's the God that we pray to. That's the God say, hey, I'm going to impregnate virgins and I'm going to bring my son through these virgins so we can fulfill more prophecy. They said he the father of Thor. Everybody know who Thor is, the God of thunder. But look, all of this, he ain't no God. This was a real man in war. That's all it was.
Times, and this is actually the second largest hub of Jews outside of Israel is here in the United States. So there was a lot of Romans who converted, including Roman elites like Queen Helena and Nero converted to Judaism. Nero. There was also mass conversion within the Roman Empire itself. We also know that there was a lot of other conversions that happened with the Khazars, for example, the Khazarian Empire, which takes up modern day Ukraine, parts of Russia, not Czechoslovakia. Let me pull up the map here. The various different, so pretty much, Georgia, Russia, and Ukraine predominantly, family ancestors who converted at some point. Let's keep hearing what he has to say.
The term Palestine was coined by the Romans in order to dissociate the place that was called Judea until now. It had no connection to Arabs for the simple reason that Arabs arrived to the land of Palestine only 600 years later during the Arab conquering. So there were no Arabs in the land of Israel.
Okay, so if the Romans were saying, okay, we're going to call this Palestine because we want to de-Judaize the area, then a lot of the people who were Jews in that area would now be, over many generations, would identify as just part of Palestine. Palestinian, that's what they would think. It's just like.
And that's why they bombing the Palestine. Y'all see what they doing in Israel, bombing the Palestine? Now, if you understand what Trey Gang telling y'all, right? It's a major war going on with the Palestine people. They genociding them people, bro. They killing these people by the hundreds a day. They bombing kids and women. The Iranians is doing it. The Jews, the real Jews is in America. The other Jews is in Israel, the one that got in control. The real Jews is in America, and they all billionaires. They own Hollywood, they own Fox News, they own the radio station, they own all of this shit. The Jewish people. So once you think about it, not only that these people scatter all over the world, but they got higher authority in every country they stay in America. They control the presidents, the laws, and the money. Everywhere in the world where they stand at, they presidents, lawmakers, they the real puppet masters. Right? If they conquer, check this out, you own everything in the world. You got control of the world, but you got one problem. You got to control this. This the big money. You got cargo coming in. They got to supply all of this. This where all the opioids, the poppy plants, medicine, fruits, apples, this where all this shit is. So look, when I went to this what it's called, iconism. This where they use icons, image is a religious image. It was made for you to accept this art. Like, oh man, this was painted, this some old shit. Oh, we could trust this art, but it was designed for you to believe in Christ. It was designed for you to worship false idols. It was designed for you to like, look, all of this just is painted after their own likeness. So all of this, what they talking about the wrath of God, we thinking there's gonna be God in the sky. No, the wrath of God is, boy, if everybody found out that Jesus is actually a fictional character, and this proven, and if the whole world wake up, this was gonna happen in 24 hours. Man, they finna kill us. Look.
The Byzantine iconoclasm, ancient Greek, epsilon kappa omicron nu omicron nu alpha chi alpha, Romanized, iconomachia lit. Image struggle, war on icons, are two periods in the history of the Byzantine Empire when the use of religious images or icons was opposed by religious and imperial authorities within the ecumenical patriarchate, at the time still comprising the Roman Latin and the Eastern Orthodox traditions, and the temporal imperial hierarchy. The first iconoclasm, one as it is sometimes called, occurred between about 726 and 787, while the second iconoclasm occurred between 814 and 842. Two, according to the traditional view, Byzantine iconoclasm was started by a ban on religious images promulgated by the Byzantine Emperor Leo III the Isaurian. 3, and continued under his successors. 4. It was accompanied by widespread destruction of religious images and persecution of supporters of the veneration of images. The papacy remained firmly in support of the use of religious images throughout the period, and the whole episode widened the growing divergence between the Byzantine and Carolingian traditions in what was still a unified European church, as well as facilitating the reduction or removal of Byzantine political control over parts of the Italian peninsula. Iconoclasm is the deliberate destruction within a culture of the culture's own religious images and other symbols or monuments, usually for religious or political motives. People who engage in or support iconoclasm are called iconoclasts, Greek for breakers of icons, epsilon kappa omicron nu omicron kappa lambda sigma alpha iota, a term that has come to be applied figuratively to any person who breaks or disdains established dogmata or conventions. Conversely, people who revere or venerate religious images are derisively called iconolaters, epsilon kappa omicron nu omicron lambda tau epsilon. They are normally known as iconoduli or iconos iconophili. These terms were, however, not a part of the Byzantine debate over images. They have been brought into common usage by modern historians from the 17th century, and their application to Byzantium increased considerably in the late 20th century. The Byzantine term for the debate over religious imagery, ikonomachy, means struggle over images or image struggle. Some sources also say that the iconoclasts were against intercession to the saints and denied the usage of relics. However, it is disputed. 2. Iconoclasm has generally been motivated theologically by the biblical commandment, which forbade the making, veneration, and worshipping of graven images, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Exodus 20 verses 4-5, Deuteronomy 5 verses 8-9, see also biblical law in Christianity. The two periods of iconoclasm in the Byzantine Empire during the 8th and 9th centuries made use of this theological theme in discussions over the propriety of images of holy figures, including Christ, the Virgin Mary, or Theotokos, and saints. It was a debate triggered by changes in Orthodox worship, which were themselves generated by the major social and political upheavals of the 7th century for the Byzantine Empire. Traditional explanations for Byzantine iconoclasm have sometimes focused on the importance of Islamic prohibitions against images influencing Byzantine thought. According to Arnold J. Toynbee, 5, for example, it was the prestige of Islamic military successes in the 7th and 8th centuries that motivated Byzantine Christians to adopt the Islamic position of rejecting and destroying devotional and liturgical images. The role of women and monks in supporting the veneration of images has also been asserted. Social and class-based arguments have been put forward, such as that iconoclasm created political and economic divisions in Byzantine society, that it was generally supported by the Eastern, poorer, non-Greek peoples of the empire, 6, who had to constantly deal with Arab raids. On the other hand, the wealthier Greeks of Constantinople and also the peoples of the Balkan and Italian provinces strongly opposed iconoclasm. 6. The claim of such a geographical distribution has, however, been disputed. 7. A reevaluation of the written and material evidence relating to the period of Byzantine iconoclasm has challenged many of the basic assumptions and factual assertions of the traditional account. How Byzantine iconoclasm influenced the later Protestant Reformation. 8. 9. Background. Edit. Byzantine iconoclasm, Kludov Psalter, 9th century. 10. Christian worship by the 6th century had developed a clear belief in the intercession of saints. This belief was also influenced by a concept of hierarchy of sanctity, with the Trinity at its pinnacle, followed by the Virgin Mary, referred to in Greek as the Theotokos, birth-giver of God, or Meter Theou, Mother of God. The saints, living holy men, women, and spiritual elders, followed by the rest of humanity. Thus, in order to obtain blessings or divine favor, early Christians, like Christians today, would often pray or ask an intermediary, such as the saints or the Theotokos, or living fellow Christians believed to be holy, to intercede on their behalf with Christ. A strong sacramentality and belief in the importance of physical presence also joined the belief in intercession of saints with the use of relics and holy images, or icons, in early Christian practices.
So all of this basically was finna tell you that these people had to depict Jesus, they had to depict Mary, they had to depict all the prophets in the Bible. Just to make it more real. Like, yeah, this is the reason why you need to believe in Jesus. This is why you need to believe in the Bible. You see what I'm saying? So if you read in the Bible that these people were worshiping stones and rocks and images, that's why in the book of Genesis they said, come, let's make man in our image. So guess what exactly they did? This how they created man. Through images in arts. Through images in arts. That's the only way that a man can make another man, through imagery. This how they was getting away with it. Then this clearly telling you, oh, this how they getting away with the religion. This how they getting away with this. Why we believe in this shit, bruh.
Practices. 11. Believers would, therefore, make pilgrimages to places sanctified by the physical presence of Christ or prominent saints and martyrs, such as the site of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Relics or holy objects, rather than places, which were a part of the claimed remains of, or had supposedly come into contact with Christ, the Virgin, or a saint, were also widely utilized in Christian practices at this time. Relics, a firmly embedded part of veneration by this period, provided physical presence of the divine, but were not infinitely reproducible. An original relic was required, and still usually required believers to undertake pilgrimage or have contact with somebody who had. The use of images had greatly increased during this period and had generated a growing opposition among many in the church, although the progress and extent of these views is now unclear. Images in the form of mosaics and paintings were widely used in churches, homes, and other places such as over city gates, and had since the reign of Justinian I been increasingly taking on a spiritual significance of their own, and regarded at least in the popular mind as capable of possessing capacities in their own right, so that the image acts or behaves as the subject itself is expected to act or behave.
What? So look. So when I was reading all of this, like this right here.
Behave. It makes known its wishes. It enacts key events of the 7th century, which was a period of major crisis for the Byzantine Empire, formed a catalyst for the expansion of the use of images of the holy and caused a dramatic shift in responses to them. Whether the Achairopoieta were a symptom or cause, the late 6th to 8th centuries witnessed the increasing thinning of the boundary between images not made by human hands and images made by human hands. Images of Christ, the Theotokos, and saints increasingly came to be regarded as relics, contact relics, and Achairopoieta already were, as points of access to the divine. By praying before an image of a holy figure, the believer's prayers were magnified by proximity to the holy. This change in practice seems to have been a major and organic development in Christian worship, which responded to the needs of believers to have access to divine support during the insecurities of the 7th century. It was not a change orchestrated or controlled by the Church, although the Quinisext Council in 692 did not explicitly state that images should be prayed to. It stated that images of Christ had to render him in human form, instead of, for example, symbolically as a lamb, to testify to his human incarnation.
Man, y'all heard that stuff? That's why they had to make Jesus in image in human form. Cause look, we ain't gonna pray to a statue. We ain't gonna pray, you know what I'm saying, to a rock. But if you paint a picture, you can put that picture in the church or in the Bible or you can wear a cross around your neck. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. Look.
Incarnation. 14, because Jesus manifested himself as human, it was acceptable to make images of him, just like it was acceptable to make images of the saints and other humans. 15, the events which have traditionally been labeled Byzantine iconoclasm may be seen as the efforts of the organized church and the imperial authorities to respond to these changes and to try to reassert some institutional control over popular practice. Citation needed. The rise of Islam in the 7th century had also caused some consideration of the use of holy images. Early Islamic belief stressed the impropriety of iconic representation. Earlier scholarship tried to link Byzantine iconoclasm directly to Islam by arguing that Byzantine emperors saw the success of the early caliphate and decided that Byzantine use of images, as opposed to Islamic aniconism, had angered God. This does not seem entirely plausible, however.
So, it didn't anger God, it angered the people who behind this God. So that's why when it come to Muslim, they didn't paint no image. That's like when you go to Muslim Islam, they don't just really got images. But when you come to Christianity, it tells you don't have images, but they got images of Jesus, stones, so they want us to worship a tablet, some stones, because they had text on it and said that came from God. So you got Moses with the stone tablet, then you got prophets in the Bible, then you got priests in the Bible. Man, there you go. Now you see how images of religion is very clever. It's so clever, man. You just don't want a million. Man, even with that alone, man, look how many people that's Christian right today just because of those images. They had something to solve.
However, the use of images had probably been increasing in the years leading up to the outbreak of iconoclasm. 16, one notable change came in 695, when Justinian II put a full-faced image of Christ on the obverse of his gold coins. The effect on iconoclast opinion is unknown, but the change certainly caused Caliph Abd al-Malik to break permanently with his previous adoption of Byzantine coin types to start a purely Islamic coinage with lettering only. 17, this appears more like two opposed camps asserting their positions, pro and anti-images, than one empire seeking to imitate the other. More striking is the fact that Islamic iconoclasm rejected any depictions of living people or animals, not only religious images. By contrast, Byzantine iconomachy concerned itself only with the question of the holy presence, or lack thereof, of images. Thus, although the rise of Islam may have created an environment in which images were at the forefront of intellectual question and debate, Islamic iconoclasm does not seem to have had a direct causal role in the development of the Byzantine image debate. In fact, Muslim territories became havens for iconophile refugees. 18, however, it has been argued that Leo III, because of his Syrian background, could have been influenced by Islamic beliefs and practices, which could have inspired his first removal of images. 19, the goal of the iconoclasts was 20, to restore the church to the strict opposition to images and worship that they believed characterized at the least some parts of the early church. Theologically, one aspect of the debate, as with most in Christian theology at the time, revolved around the two natures of Jesus. Iconoclasts believed, 18, that icons could not represent both the divine and the human natures of the Messiah at the same time, but only separately. Because an icon which depicted Jesus as purely physical would be Nestorianism, and one which showed him as both human and divine would not be able to do so without confusing the two natures into one mixed nature, which was Monophysitism. All icons were thus heretical. 21, Leo III did preach a series of sermons in which he drew attention to the excessive behavior of the iconodules, which Leo III stated was in direct opposition to Mosaic law as shown in the Second Commandment. 22, however, no detailed writings setting out iconoclast arguments have survived, We have only brief quotations and references in the writings of the iconodules and the nature of biblical law in Christianity.
So now look. So that's why when the Black Madonna started circulating, that's why they were like, well, Jesus wasn't even white. He gotta be black. They go to Black Jesus. And the whole time, this imagery, cause look, this is a painting used by the icons, was original style to produce in the 13th and the 4th century in Italy, Middle East, Carthage, Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, and everything. So this would be the Ethiopian image of Jesus. They say don't praise no statue, but they told statue, look. Wait a minute. All of this is statues and image, and you still got people pray to these statues. This what imagery look like. So when I start looking into these people, you will see why I'm looking at these people, because they was in southern part of Africa. That's where a lot of white people was too at that time, right? So I was like, damn, once you looking at these people, hold on. This who we actually is. Look at this image. If you look at everybody in the United States right today, this is who we is. This who we is, bro, right here. That's why the white man was like, look, don't show them the good side of Africa. So this is what they had in mind. They went in the jungle, in the woods, and they came with the Bible and turned their life around. They taught them about Jesus. You see what I'm saying? And they was like, what? Who is this Jesus? Yeah, you know, this Jesus, he died for your sins. What sins? What is a sin? Well, you know, you can't do this and you can't do that. And you know, some of these animals you eat is not clean. Look. Don't they go back to Shaka Zulu? That's who we is. We came from West Africa and South Africa. Look. So once you see this imagery, you see those men on those horses, just like what the Bible said, man, look, in the apocalypse, they're gonna come. And this how they're gonna come. So guess what they did? They in the jungle, right? Wherever they at, and the white man taking them captives. But they ain't showing you the city part. Not where it's towns and cities at. That make a big difference. Don't y'all remember? I remember when I used to come up back, we used to have a big mama like this here cooking our food on the Sunday. Remember this used to be Big Mama? Everybody know who Big Mama is, right? Look at that image. So look. Look. They look just like us. They look just like us. Man, if you walk past him in a mall or something. You a squirt, you like, yeah, you know, you won't think nothing like, yeah, that's another black dude, you know, then they go quick right there, you know, they go what you call. Look. So when I traced these people back, I said, oh, that's why. Cause guess who we the descendant of? Boy, look at this. Look just like us. Look at those women. So look, when I started reading this stuff, I'm like, okay, they was during the late Iron Ages. That's all I need to know. Cause once you go to the Iron Ages, now you see how, look, once you go back to the Iron Ages, boy, now you finna see how slavery finna be in. Now you finna see that's how they got black people. Some of the black people from South Africa over there to the United States, because it was already black people over here, but the ones they brought over there was slaves and servants. So once you look at the Iron Ages, the Bronze Ages, and the Silver Ages, all of that, once you look into all of that, the Bible gonna make clear sense to you. You're gonna be like, damn, so basically the Bible done created. Look, when they go back to the Viking Ages, look, this just proof right here. Don't this go back in the Viking Ages, right? All right. When I show y'all the Viking Ages, hold on. Where is it? I need to go to world. Right here. Odin, behind the silver, the Viking, said he's the father and obsessed with knowing everything within the cosmos and willing to gain wisdom. He lost his eye for a payment for wisdom. So look, when I start looking at the Afro-Americans, y'all remember this video that I showed y'all when they were talking about the prime minister of Israel admit where the Jews came from? This is what they ain't gonna show you about the Afro-Aberrants. Look what they look like. They was in aberrant at the time too. So this would be all in aberrant, right? The slave trade. So look, once I start figuring everything out, I said, oh, that's why slavery was such a big deal. That's why slavery was such a big deal back in those days. And then once you look at him, look. These is rulers. So I started looking into all these people, right? Look at this. Come on, man. So when I looked into all of this, all because of what I found out about that Bible. Everything what I found out about the Bible, and I ain't trying to make nobody question they belief, but everything what I found out the Bible, now you see why I saved all of this. All these videos. Look, the difference between Hebrew Israelites according to the Bible. You don't see no black man do it. But they in history though. Once you read and watch these videos, go back and watch these videos, which y'all see on the screen. And I guarantee you're gonna look at the Bible more interested. If you ain't just really just read your Bible, the shit that you're gonna find out, I bet you would start reading it then. I bet you would start reading it then. So yeah, gang, I'm gonna get on there about this junk, y'all. I'm gonna get on there about this junk. I'm gonna go live and hang out later on tonight and laugh and joke with y'all. You know what I'm saying? I ain't got nothing to do, you know what I'm talking about? I'm gonna hang out and laugh and crack jokes with y'all and talk about some stuff. But if you go back, that's why I saved these movies. That's why I saved these goddamn videos. Cause every video, I got my answer of what I'm looking for. The truth about Israel, I got my answer what I'm looking at. The secret God behind all religion. Look at the signs. The Star of David. Yup. So yeah, gang, I'm getting on about this, gentlemen. Y'all be cool and y'all be safe. And I'll be back after the episodes.